To approach Paris is to encounter a city that has already been imagined for you. Long before the traveler sets foot upon its pavement, the city exists as a shimmering accumulation of cinematic frames, literary echoes, and historical myths. It is a place so thoroughly curated that it can feel, at first glance, like a finished work of art, a static masterpiece of zinc and limestone frozen in the amber of the 19th century. Yet, to see Paris only as a museum is to miss the profound, restless vitality of its design. Paris is not a relic, it is a meticulous, ongoing argument between the weight of history and the momentum of the modern. This narrative is an attempt to decode that argument. It is an exploration of the city as a living system, a journey through the layers of a metropolis that has spent 2 millennia perfecting the art of urban existence. Across these 18 chapters, we will navigate the physical and intellectual geography of a city that remains the world's most successful social experiment. Contained within this story are 100 essential facts, the structural bones of the city, from the precise 105 square kilometers of its footprint to the 6 million souls resting in its chalky depths. Alongside this historical and civic data, we have woven 20 essential tips for the inhabitant, the tactical secrets that allow one to move through the city not as a disruptive guest, but as a graceful participant in its daily rhythms. The story begins with the river. The Seine is the city's primary author, a silver curve of water that dictated the settlement of the Parisii tribes and later provided the strategic logic for the Roman town of Lutetia. Everything in Paris flows from this central artery. The river is the reason for the city's dense, horizontal structure, a design that refuses to rise in order to maintain a human scale. Unlike the vertical ambitions of London or New York, Paris chose to expand outward and downward, creating a skyline that is a disciplined horizon line, broken only by the deliberate punctuation of monuments. This choice, this refusal to become like everywhere else, is the defining characteristic of the Parisian identity. As we move through the 20 arrondissements, arranged in their famous clockwise snail shell, we encounter a city of distinct villages, each with a mandate to preserve a specific aspect of the human experience. We will walk the left bank, where the ghosts of Sartre and Beauvoir still linger in the haze of the café terraces, and the right bank, where the global engines of luxury and finance drive the prestige of the Republic. We will explore the breathing spaces, the great woods of Boulogne and Vincennes, and the secret gardens of the Petite Cincha, where nature is being invited back into the stone to prepare the city for the environmental challenges of the 2030 vision. But to truly understand Paris, one must look beneath the surface. The city is a masterpiece of infrastructure, a labyrinth of metro tunnels, ghost stations, and 19th-century sewers that function with a quiet industrial precision. This subterranean world is the city's shadow, a place of engineering heritage that allows the surface to remain beautiful. It is here, in the tension between the hidden machine and the visible monument, that the urban efficiency of Paris is born. Throughout this work, the tone remains consistent, a calm, authoritative observation of a city that prizes restraint. We will examine the unwritten code of Parisian etiquette, the vital importance of the bonjour, the late-night ritual of the apéritif, and the democratic sanctity of the Sunday rest. We will see how Paris uses sport and celebration as forms of diplomacy, turning the city into a global arena for the Olympics while maintaining the intimate bohemian charm of a Montmartre cabaret. The reader will discover a city that is a custodian of culture, protecting the Mona Lisa and the Marmottan Monets with a fierce devotion, yet also a city of innovation, where the legacy of the Curies and Pasteur continues in the high-tech laboratories of the Southern Plateau. We will see how Paris constructs its global image through the architecture of the heart, the romantic symbolism of its bridges and the defiant resilience of its motto, Fluctuat nec mergitur. This is a story of a city that knows exactly what it is. Paris does not seek to reinvent itself every decade. Instead, it refines its essence. It is a city that understands that true power lies in continuity, that beauty emerges from discipline, and that the future is best built upon a foundation of well-preserved memory. By the end of this journey, the 100 facts will have provided the map, and the 20 tips will have provided the key, but the city itself will remain, as it always has been, a limestone dream that invites us to wake up and see the world with a bit more elegance. Welcome to Paris. Not the city of the postcard, but the city of the inhabitant. Let us begin at point zero, in the shadow of Notre Dame, and walk outward through the spiral of time and stone. The city built on water. The Seine moves through Paris with the unhurried patience of something that has shaped stone for 2,000 years. From the air, the river describes a graceful arc through the Île-de-France region, its bends and curves like cursive script written across the landscape. Here, where the water flows deepest and the islands offer natural fortification, a settlement took root that would become one of the world's great cities. The river chose Paris as much as Paris chose the river. Stand on any of the 37 bridges that span the Seine and you can feel the city's essential geometry. The water divides Paris into its northern right bank and southern left bank, each with its own character, its own mythology. But the division is gentle, an invitation rather than a barrier. The bridges themselves, some medieval, some Baroque, some spare and modern, suggest connection, the constant crossing back and forth that defines Parisian life. And there in the middle of it all lie the two islands, the Isle de la Cité, heart and birthplace of the city, and the smaller Isle St. Louis, serene and residential. Within its tight municipal boundaries of just 105 square kilometers, Paris holds an entire world. It is, by modern standards, a remarkably compact city, roughly the size of a modest suburban county elsewhere. You could walk across its diameter in a few hours if you had the stamina, though you would miss everything that matters. The city's small footprint is part of its magic. Density creates energy, and in Paris, every street corner seems to hum with possibility. The 105 square kilometers contain 20 arrondissements that spiral outward from the center like a nautilus shell, each with its distinct personality, from the steep streets of Montmartre in the 18th to the quiet elegance of the 7th. But to speak only of the city proper is to tell half the story. The metropolitan area of Paris sprawls far beyond those historic gates, encompassing the entire Île-de-France region in a vast urban constellation. In 1950, when the city was still recovering from war, some 6.3 million people lived in this greater metropolitan area. By 2025, that number has swelled to more than 13 million, making it one of Europe's largest urban centers. The city proper, meanwhile, maintains a relatively stable population of around 2.1 million within its boundaries, hemmed in by geography and history. The people have spilled outward into the suburbs, the banlieues, creating rings of development that circle the historic core like ripples on water. This outward growth tells a story of prosperity and pressure, of a city bursting its ancient seams. The population doubled across the decades, driven by the magnetic pull of opportunity, by waves of migration from former colonies and neighboring nations, by young people drawn to universities and culture and the promise of reinvention that cities offer. The suburbs absorbed this growth, developing their own centers and identities, connected to the heart by an intricate web of trains and roads that pulse with commuters each morning and evening. Within those 105 square kilometers, the demographic tapestry grows more intricate each year. Walk through the Marais and you hear a dozen languages before you've gone 3 blocks. In Belleville, Chinese grocers sit beside North African cafes beside kosher butchers, a jumble of cultures that somehow coheres into neighborhood. The 13th arrondissement has become one of Europe's largest Asian quarters, while Chateau Rouge in the 18th thrums with West African markets and music. The numbers sketch the outline of this diversity. Roughly 20% of Paris's residents were born outside France, bringing with them languages, traditions, cuisines, and perspectives that continually remake the city's character. Some come from former French colonies in North and West Africa, from Vietnam and Cambodia, from the Caribbean islands. Others arrive from elsewhere in Europe, from the Americas, from the Middle East. They settle, they work, they open shops and restaurants, they send their children to French schools, they argue in cafes about politics in Wolof and Arabic and Mandarin. The age distribution of Paris skews younger than much of France, as cities do. Students pack the Latin Quarter, young professionals colonize formerly working-class neighborhoods in the northeast, and families cluster where apartments are larger and parks more plentiful. Yet Paris is no mere youth hostel. The elderly remain, particularly in the more established arrondissements, maintaining apartments they've occupied for decades, their presence a thread of continuity in a constantly changing city. The gender balance tilts slightly female, as it does in most European cities, though the ratio is nearly even. But these demographic facts, these percentages and population counts, matter less than what they create: a city perpetually in conversation with itself, never quite settled, always becoming. On any given morning, the metro carries Moroccan grandmothers and French-Japanese teenagers, Polish construction workers and Senegalese students, all pressed together in democratic discomfort, all headed somewhere in the great urban machine. And through it all, constant and patient, flows the Seine. The river made Paris possible. Before there were boulevards or sewers, before there was a Louvre or an Eiffel Tower, there was this water. The Celtic Parisii tribe understood what the river offered: transportation, trade, food, defense, and fresh water. They settled the islands in the 3rd century before Christ, building their wooden houses where the Cathedral of Notre Dame would later rise. The Romans, arriving later, recognized the same strategic value. River crossroads become cities. They always have. For 2 millennia, the Seine was Paris's highway and its lifeblood. Boats carried wine from Burgundy, stone from upstream quarries, grain from the surrounding countryside. The river's depth and steady flow meant goods could move efficiently, connecting Paris to the sea via Rouen and Le Havre, and through tributaries to the interior of France. The city's merchants grew wealthy from this trade, their guilds powerful. The water provided fish for Lenten Fridays and power for mills. The city's oldest industries, tanning, dyeing, metalworking, clustered along the banks, using the river's flow for their processes. Even as railroads and trucks diminished the Seine's commercial importance, the river remained central to Paris's identity. It still carries freight, though less than before. Tourist boats now outnumber barges, carrying visitors past the familiar monuments that line its banks like an architectural timeline. But the Seine is more than picturesque. It is the city's mirror and its margin, a space of transition where the urban grid gives way to something more organic. The quays provide room to breathe, to walk, to pause. Parisians and visitors alike gravitate to the water, especially in summer when the banks transform into temporary beaches. The Seine also grounds Paris in geology and climate. The river carved the valley, depositing the sediments that would become building sites. It occasionally floods, reminding the city that nature still has a say in human arrangements. The Great Flood of 1910 submerged much of the city, its waters lapping at the knees of the Dzot statue on the Pont de l'Alma, the unofficial measuring stick of Parisian inundations. Climate change has made such floods more unpredictable, another reminder that the river giveth and the river taketh away. From above, whether you're looking at a satellite map or standing in the Eiffel Tower's observation deck, Paris reveals its essential structure. The Seine bisects the 105 square kilometers, the great axis around which everything else arranges itself. The density is remarkable, so many buildings, so many lives, contained in such a small space. The geometric precision of Haussmann's boulevards radiating from Grands Places. The irregular medieval tangle of streets in the Marais and the Latin Quarter. The parks, Luxembourg, Tuileries, Buttes-Chaumont, providing green relief from the stone. And everywhere, woven through it all, that sense of layered history, of a city that has continually rebuilt itself on its own foundations. This is the paradox of Paris, ancient and modern, compact and sprawling, French and international, defined by its river and by everything built beside it. The 2.1 million who live within those 105 square kilometers share space with history and with each other in ways that create both friction and vitality. The 13 million in the greater metropolitan area orbit this dense core, drawn by its gravity. The foundations of Paris are both literal and figurative, the limestone beneath the streets, quarried for centuries to build the city's bones, and the river that made settlement possible. Everything else follows from these essentials: water, stone, and the human impulse to gather where trade and shelter intersect. Walk along the Seine at dusk when the streetlights begin to glow and you can feel that ancient logic still at work, the reason this place became Paris and not just another crossing on just another river. The spiral and its stories. Paris is numbered. Not haphazardly, not by committee or historical accident, but with the deliberate logic of a watch spring unwinding. Stand at the center, at the Isle de la site where the city was born, and the arrondissements spiral outward in a clockwise progression from 1 to 20. First the tight core, then the expanding circles, each turn of the spiral encompassing more territory, more lives, more distinct flavors of what it means to be Parisian. This arrangement dates to 1860, when Baron Haussmann's grand reorganization absorbed the surrounding villages and imposed rational order on medieval chaos. Before that, Paris had 12 arrondissements. After, there were 20, each with its own mayor, its own town hall, its own administrative identity within the larger whole. The spiral is elegant, almost mathematical, a Fibonacci sequence made manifest in municipal boundaries. It gives structure to the city's complexity, a way of naming and knowing what might otherwise be overwhelming. Yet within this ordered system, each arrondissement maintains fierce individuality. The numbers matter less than the neighborhoods they contain, those smaller territories of identity that predate any administrative map. To say you live in the Fourth tells one story, to say you live in the Marais tells another entirely. The spiral provides framework, but the neighborhoods provide soul. At the very heart lies Point Zero, a brass marker embedded in the cobblestones before Notre Dame on the Isle de la Cité. All distances in France are measured from this spot, the symbolic center not just of Paris but of the entire nation. Stand here and you are at kilometer zero, the point from which everything radiates. The marker itself is modest, easily overlooked amid the tourists and pigeons, but its symbolism runs deep. This is where Roman Paris began, where medieval Paris flourished, where the cathedral rose to dominate the skyline for 8 centuries. The Isle de la Cité remains what it has always been, the ancient heart, dense with history and power. Here sits not only Notre Dame, wounded by fire in 2019 but enduring, being rebuilt stone by stone, but also the conciergerie where Marie Antoinette awaited the guillotine, the Sainte-Chapelle with its impossible walls of stained glass, and the Palais de Justice still dispensing French law from Gothic halls. The island is government and religion, memory and authority, compressed into a space you could walk around in 20 minutes. Cross to the left bank and you enter different territory. The 5th and 6th arrondissements hold the Latin Quarter and Saint-Germain-des-Prés, neighborhoods whose very names conjure intellectual life. For centuries, students have climbed the slope to the Pantheon, have argued philosophy in cafés along the Boulevard Saint-Michel, have browsed for books in dusty shops that smell of paper and possibility. The Sorbonne anchors this world, its medieval roots grown into a sprawling modern university, but the intellectual tradition extends far beyond any single institution. The Latin Quarter earned its name from the language scholars once spoke in its streets and lecture halls. Though Latin has faded, the neighborhood's character as a place of learning persists. The great lycées are here, Louis le Grand, Henri IV, feeding ambitious students into the grandes écoles. The Jardin des Plantes offers scientific contemplation alongside botanical beauty. Small cinemas show obscure films to devoted audiences. The bookstores of the Rue de la Boucherie overlook the Seine, their shelves crammed with philosophy, poetry, politics. Just west, Saint-Germain-des-Prés cultivated a different but related identity. If the Latin Quarter was scholarly, Saint-Germain became artistic and literary. Its cafés, Les Deux Magots, Café de Flore, hosted existentialists and jazz musicians, writers and revolutionaries. Sartre and Beauvoir held court here, Camus and Hemingway drank here, ideas and cigarette smoke mingling in equal measure. The neighborhood has gentrified into luxury, its apartments now among the city's most expensive, but something of that mid-century bohemian spirit lingers in the narrow streets around the Church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, in the art galleries, in the literary cafés that trade on their famous ghosts. These left-bank neighborhoods establish themselves as zones of thought and creativity partly through institutional presence. The universities, the publishing houses, the galleries, but also through mythology, the stories they told about themselves. To live on the left bank meant something. It suggested intellectual seriousness, artistic ambition, a certain disdain for commercial success. Whether this was ever entirely true matters less than the fact that people believed it, that the belief shaped behavior and attracted like-minded souls, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of bohemian intellectualism. Cross back over the Seine to the right bank and the character shifts again. The Marais, occupying much of the 3rd and 4th arrondissements, has the city's longest continuous history as a living neighborhood. Its name means marsh, remembering the swampland that once lay here before medieval nobles drained it and built their mansions. Those hotels particuliers still stand, Renaissance and classical facades hiding courtyards and gardens, many now converted to museums. The Place de Vosges, oldest planned square in Paris, offers geometrical serenity behind brick and stone arcades. But the Marais is far more than architectural heritage. It is Jewish Paris, home to synagogues and kosher bakeries, to a community that has endured through centuries of both acceptance and persecution. The Rue de Rosiers still smells of falafel and halal, though gentrification nibbles at its edges. It is also the center of Paris's LGBTQ+ community, its bars and clubs creating spaces of freedom and celebration. And it has become relentlessly fashionable, its medieval streets lined with boutiques and galleries, its Sunday afternoons thick with crowds hunting for the perfect vintage jacket or handmade jewelry. The Marais demonstrates how neighborhoods evolve, how different communities can coexist and overlap. Walk from the Place de la République through the Marais to the Seine and you pass through layers of identity. Hipster cafes give way to Jewish delis, give way to gay bars, give way to Chinese wholesale shops, all compressed into a few blocks. The neighborhood contains multitudes, its narrow streets too tangled for any single story to dominate. North, perched on its famous hill in the 18th arrondissement, Montmartre maintains yet another myth. Here is artistic Paris at its most picturesque, the white domes of Sacré-Cœur, the steep staircases and hidden vineyards, the Place du Tertre where tourist artists paint tourist portraits under plane trees. Montmartre was once genuinely bohemian, its cheap rents attracting Picasso and Modigliani, its cabarets inspiring Toulouse-Lautrec. The Moulin Rouge still spins, though now mainly for tour buses. The mythology persists even as the reality shifts. Montmartre has gentrified like everywhere else, its charming houses commanding steep prices. Yet something in the hill's geography, the climb required, the village-like scale, the views over Paris from the Sacré-Cœur steps, preserves a sense of separation from the rest of the city. Montmartre feels apart, slightly other, a neighborhood that happens to be in Paris rather than being quite of Paris. Each arrondissement, each neighborhood, develops its own reputation, its own character. The 16th is wealthy and conservative, its wide avenues lined with embassy flags and museums. The 11th and 20th to the east are younger and more diverse, former working-class areas transforming into creative hotspots. The 13th contains both the Asian quarter around Avenue d'Ivry and the modern towers of the new left bank development. The 7th holds ministries and monuments, its stately streets full of elegant Parisians walking elegant dogs. These identities matter to how Parisians understand their city. You don't just live in Paris, you live in a specific slice of it, with specific associations and assumptions. Address defines identity. The arrondissements provide shorthand, a way of placing someone in the urban geography and by extension in social space. Yet for all the careful organization of the 20 arrondissements, for all the distinct neighborhood identities, Paris has always had an external shadow. The business district of La Défense rises to the west, just beyond the peripherique ring road, technically in the suburb of Puteaux but spiritually, or perhaps anti-spiritually, the city's necessary other. La Défense is everything central Paris is not, vertical where Paris is horizontal, modern where Paris is historic, purely functional where Paris is atmospheric. Its towers of steel and glass house the headquarters of French corporations and international firms, their height unthinkable within the city proper where nothing can overshadow the monuments. The Grande Archie anchors the district, a hollow cube of white marble that aligns with the Arc de Triomphe and the Louvre in a grand axis reaching back through history. 200,000 people work in La Défense, commuting in each morning from across the region, filling the towers with the machinery of global capitalism, then dispersing again each evening. It is essential and unloved, efficient and soulless, the place where Paris conducts the business of being a world city without compromising the aesthetic of being Paris. The separation is geographic and psychological. La Défense handles money and power while Paris proper maintains beauty and culture, a division of labor that satisfies no one but somehow functions. The relationship between center and periphery, between the 20 arrondissements and the suburbs beyond, between historic neighborhoods and modern business districts, defines much of contemporary Paris. The spiral remains elegant on maps, but real urban life respects no boundaries. People flow across arrondissements following work and love and cheaper rent. Neighborhoods gentrify or decline, their identities shifting with their residents. La Défense grows taller while Notre Dame is restored, modern and ancient in perpetual negotiation. Yet the organizing logic persists. The spiral from 1 to 20, the distinction between left-bank intellectualism and right-bank commerce, the neighborhood identities that give texture to daily life, these frameworks still shape how Parisians understand their city. Point zero remains the center, the brass marker worn smooth by countless feet, all distances measured from this single spot. The city spirals outward from there in its numbered progression, each turn of the spring holding new stories, new communities, new ways of being Parisian within the vast and intimate geography of home. Layers of stone and memory. Paris is built on Paris. Dig anywhere in the city and you strike history. Roman foundations beneath medieval cellars beneath Haussmannian basements, each era leaving its sediment. The city grows upward and outward, but it also grows downward, accumulating centuries like geological strata. What lies beneath matters as much as what stands above, the visible city resting on invisible depths. In the 5th arrondissement, tucked behind an ordinary apartment building on Rue Monge, the Arons de Lutis drowses in the afternoon sun. Few tourists find it. Fewer still recognize what it represents, the oldest surviving structure in Paris, a Roman amphitheater dating to the 1st century AD. The arena once held 15,000 spectators who came to watch gladiatorial combat and theatrical performances in what was then Lutetia, a modest provincial town of the Roman Empire. The amphitheater speaks of ambition, of a settlement that aspired to Roman civilization with its entertainments and civic grandeur. Lutetia was never Rome, never Lyon or Arles, but it was Roman enough to warrant an arena, a forum, public baths fed by aqueducts. The city occupied the left bank then, the gentle slope between the Seine and the mountain that would become Montagne Sainte-Geneviève. The right bank was marsh and forest, uninhabitable. The islands in the river offered refuge when barbarians threatened, but daily life unfolded on the southern heights. The arena fell into ruin when Rome fell, its stones scavenged for medieval buildings, its purpose forgotten. For more than 1,000 years it lay buried, first under rubble, then under gardens and houses, until workers excavating a bus depot in 1869 broke through to ancient stone. The rediscovery sparked debate. Some wanted to demolish the ruins and continue building. Others, including Victor Hugo, championed preservation. The preservationists won, barely. The arena was excavated, restored after a fashion, turned into a public garden where old men now play pétanque where gladiators once fought. This pattern of burial and rediscovery repeats throughout Paris. The city built over itself out of necessity and neglect, each generation constructing atop the ruins of the last. Medieval Paris rose from Roman foundations, often literally reusing the same stones. The city walls expanded outward in concentric rings, Philip Augustus's wall in the 13th century, Charles V in the 14th, the Fermiers General wall in the 18th, each rendering the previous one obsolete, transforming fortifications into foundations for new construction. Medieval Paris developed its character in narrow streets and dense neighborhoods, a labyrinth of buildings pressed against each other, often touching overhead, blocking sunlight from the alleys below. These streets followed no grid, no plan. They evolved organically, following property lines and ancient paths, curving around churches and noble houses, branching unpredictably. The Marais and the Latin Quarter still preserve this medieval tangle, their streets refusing the logic of right angles. Walk through the Marais today and you follow routes laid down 7 centuries ago. The Rue de Rosiers was already old when Haussmann began his renovations. The Place de Vosges sits on what was once a royal tournament ground, then a manufacturing square, its architecture frozen in the early 17th century. These streets remember when Paris was a city of 50,000, when the right bank was newly settled, when wolves still prowled the forest beyond the walls. The medieval city was dense with the living and crowded with the dead. Churches had their graveyards, of course, but the main cemetery, Les Innocents near Les Halles, became grotesquely overcrowded. Bodies were buried in mass graves, layer upon layer, the earth so saturated with decomposing flesh that it could accept no more. The smell was unbearable. The cemetery walls, lined with charnel houses displaying bones, enclosed a space of horror dressed as devotion. By the 18th century, Paris faced a crisis of corpses. The cemeteries were full, the city growing, and the Enlightenment's emphasis on public health made the old practices intolerable. The solution was radical: empty the cemeteries and move the bones underground, into the abandoned limestone quarries that honeycombed the left bank beneath Montparnasse and Denfert-Trochereau. The catacombs that resulted are among Paris's strangest spaces. Beginning in 1786, workers transferred millions of skeletons from surface cemeteries to the old quarry tunnels. The bones were arranged with eerie artistry, femurs and skulls stacked in walls and patterns, creating an underground ossuary that stretches for miles. Signs mark which cemetery each section came from. Inscriptions remind visitors of mortality in Latin and French. Here lie the bones of medieval peasants beside those of revolution victims, all anonymized by death and time, reduced to building material for a vast underground monument to human impermanence. The catacombs serve as metaphor and as fact. They demonstrate Paris's genius for transforming problems into attractions, for making even death picturesque. But they also reveal the literal truth that Paris rests on hollowed ground, that beneath the city of light lies a city of shadows, tunnels and quarries and forgotten spaces. Urban explorers still penetrate the unmapped sections illegally, holding parties in chambers filled with bones, getting lost in passages that haven't seen official inspection in centuries. The 19th century brought different attitudes toward the past. Where medieval Parisians pillaged Roman ruins for building stone, Victorian-era Parisians developed archaeology, preservation, historical consciousness. The discovery of the Arons de Lutis prompted efforts to find and protect other ancient sites. Roman baths emerged from beneath medieval buildings on the left bank, incorporated into the Musée de Cluny. Workers digging metro tunnels reported finding ancient wells, walls, pottery. The city established rules for what to do when excavation revealed history. This impulse to preserve and display extended beyond Roman remains to medieval structures threatened by Haussmann's renovations. As the Baron drove his boulevards through the old city, demolishing thousands of buildings, a countermovement emerged arguing for historical conservation. The architect Viollet-le-Duc restored Notre Dame and other Gothic monuments, sometimes inventing details that had never existed, creating a romantic vision of medieval Paris that satisfied 19th-century longings more than historical accuracy. The tension between preservation and progress defines modern Paris's relationship with its own past. The city values its history but also needs to function, to accommodate cars and metro lines and modern infrastructure. The solution has been selective preservation: protect the monuments, the special buildings, the picturesque neighborhoods, but allow change elsewhere. This creates a city where ancient and modern coexist uneasily, where a Roman arena sits behind apartment blocks, where medieval churches anchor modern squares. In the Place de la Concorde, at the heart of the city, stands an object that embodies this complex relationship with history: the Luxor obelisk. Carved in Egypt 3,300 years ago, the obelisk was given to France in 1829 by Muhammad Ali Pasha and erected in the square in 1836. It is older than Paris, older than France, older than Christianity. Its hieroglyphics praise Ramesses II, a pharaoh who ruled when Paris was unnamed forest. The obelisk's placement was deliberate. The Place de la Concorde had been Place de la Révolution, where Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette lost their heads to the guillotine, where the Terror conducted its grim theater. After the Revolution, the square needed a new identity, something neutral, something that wouldn't remind Parisians of their divisions. An ancient Egyptian monument, politically meaningless but visually striking, fit perfectly. But the obelisk also represented 19th-century France's imperial ambitions and its fascination with antiquity. France was expanding into North Africa, Napoleon had campaigned in Egypt, and Egyptian motifs had become fashionable. The obelisk served as trophy and ornament, a way of claiming connection to ancient civilizations, of positioning France as heir to classical grandeur. That the monument was extracted from Egypt and transported to Paris with no regard for its original context troubled few people at the time. It was, simply, beautiful and old and exotic, exactly what Napoleon III Paris wanted to be. The obelisk also solved a technical problem. The square needed a central monument, but nothing French seemed appropriate given the site's bloody history. The obelisk's foreignness was its virtue. It stood outside French history while marking the center of French power, a 75-foot-tall reminder that Paris saw itself as a universal city, a capital not just of France but of civilization itself. This gathering of historical fragments, Roman arenas, medieval streets, 18th-century catacombs, Egyptian obelisks, creates a city that exists in multiple time periods simultaneously. Paris is always both ancient and modern, always aware of its layered past even as it confronts its present. The metro tunnels cut through Roman foundations. Glass pyramids rise in medieval courtyards. Every renovation risks discovering something old and protected, requiring archaeologists before construction can proceed. The city has learned to incorporate these discoveries rather than erase them. Medieval walls are exposed in basement restaurants. Roman baths form wings of museums. The catacombs offer tours to tourists willing to descend into the bone-lined dark. What once was hidden is now displayed, history turned into heritage, marketed and monetized but also genuinely valued. Yet much remains buried, unmapped, forgotten. The quarries extend far beyond the official catacombs. Medieval foundations lie under buildings that can't be excavated without demolition. Roman Lutetia exists somewhere beneath the Latin Quarter, its streets and houses mostly unexplored. The city contains its own archaeology, layers upon layers, each era leaving deposits that future generations will excavate and interpret. Stand in the Arons de Lutetia on a quiet morning and you can feel this weight of time. The ancient stone, warm in the sun, has outlasted empire and revolution, plague and war. The arena has been forgotten and remembered, buried and unearthed, nearly destroyed and finally preserved. Around it, Paris continues its noisy business, oblivious or indifferent to the fact that people cheered gladiators here 2,000 years ago. This is the paradox of historical cities. The past is everywhere and nowhere, constantly present but rarely noticed. Parisians walk on Roman roads without knowing it, live in buildings incorporating medieval stone, drink water from aqueducts whose origins no one remembers. The city accumulates history the way trees accumulate rings, each century adding its layer, the whole remaining legible if you know how to read it. The obelisk catches the afternoon light, its gold-leafed pyramidion glowing above the Place de la Concorde. Traffic circles it endlessly. Tourists photograph it without reading the hieroglyphics. It stands there, ancient and alien, a piece of Egypt in the heart of France, reminding anyone who pauses to notice that Paris is built not just on the Seine but on centuries, on layers of stone and memory, on the accumulated weight of everyone who ever lived and died and built and dreamed here. The city rises from its past, carried upward by the sediment of time. The horizontal city. Paris refuses to rise. Walk through the city center and you notice the uniformity of height, the way buildings align at their rooflines, creating corridors of stone that frame the sky in predictable rectangles. 6 or 7 stories, rarely more, the facades rising in cream-colored harmony to zinc roofs and mansard attics. The This is not accident but law, not natural evolution but imposed order, the result of regulations that have governed Parisian construction for more than a century. The rules are specific and unforgiving. In most of central Paris, buildings cannot exceed 37 meters, roughly 12 stories, though in practice most stay lower. Structures must respect the width of the street. The narrower the street, the lower the building, ensuring adequate light and air. The regulations date to Haussmann's rebuilding in the 1860s, when the Baron imposed not just new boulevards but an entire aesthetic system, a grammar of urban design that would make Paris legible, rational, beautiful in its uniformity. Stand on any of Haussmann's grand boulevards and his vision becomes clear. The buildings march in disciplined rows, their height synchronized, their facades decorated with similar balconies at the second and fifth floors, their ground floors given to commerce, their upper stories to apartments. The regularity is almost oppressive, but it creates something undeniably coherent, a city that reads as a unified composition rather than a collection of individual buildings. The skyline is a horizon line straight and low, broken only by the deliberate punctuation of monuments, the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, the Dome of Les Invalides, the Towers of Notre Dame. This horizontal character gives Paris its particular quality of light and scale. The city breathes at street level in ways that vertical cities cannot. The streets are enclosed but not canyoned. The sky remains visible, present, a participant in urban life rather than a distant abstraction glimpsed between towers. On certain evenings when the light comes in low from the west, the whole city glows, the limestone facades turning gold, the zinc roofs catching fire. This effect requires the uniformity, the discipline of height. It is beautiful because it is controlled. But control breeds resistance. By the 1960s, as cities worldwide reached for the sky, Paris seemed trapped in its own past, a museum of 19th-century urbanism, while New York and Chicago demonstrated modernity's vertical ambitions. Pressure mounted to allow taller buildings, to prove that Paris could be contemporary. The result was the Tour Montparnasse, a 210-meter office tower that opened in 1973 near the Montparnasse train station. The tower was immediately, almost universally, despised. It violated every principle of Parisian scale. Dark, rectangular, graceless, it dominated the skyline like a tombstone, visible from across the city, ruining views and photographs, its bulk overwhelming everything around it. The reaction was so visceral, so unified in its disgust, that Paris enacted even stricter height controls. No similar tower would be permitted in the city center. The Tour Montparnasse stands as monument to a mistake, a lesson in what Paris is not and will not become. The controversy revealed deep truths about Parisian identity. The city's beauty depends on restraint, on what is not built as much as what is. To permit towers would be to become like everywhere else, to surrender the horizontal harmony that makes Paris recognizable from any rooftop, any hilltop, any bridge. The skyline is patrimony, as protected as any monument. The Tour observation deck now offers the best view in Paris, people joke, because it's the only place from which you cannot see the Tour Montparnasse. Yet Paris has always negotiated between tradition and modernity, between preservation and progress. The city's architectural history is a series of scandals that eventually became beloved landmarks. The Eiffel Tower, now unimaginable to remove, was meant to be temporary, widely hated when built, dismissed as an industrial eyesore. The Pont Neuf, oldest bridge in Paris, was new and controversial in 1607. Even Haussmann's renovations, now considered quintessentially Parisian, destroyed beloved medieval neighborhoods and faced fierce opposition. In 1977, Paris accepted another architectural rupture. The Centre Pompidou opened in the Marais, designed by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers as a deliberate provocation. The building turned itself inside out, exposing its infrastructure, pipes, ducts, escalators, in bright primary colors on its exterior. It looked like a factory, like an oil refinery, like anything except a museum. Parisians were appalled. The neighborhood, with its medieval streets and Renaissance mansions, seemed violated by this insertion of aggressive modernism. But the Pompidou succeeded where Montparnasse failed. Its scale, despite its strangeness, respected the surrounding buildings. It created public space. The sloping plaza out front became a gathering place for street performers and crowds. Most importantly, it was interesting rather than merely tall. It made an argument for contemporary architecture as dialogue with history rather than dominance over it. The building has aged into grudging acceptance, even affection. It is still shocking, still other, but recognizably Parisian in its willingness to provoke. These landmarks represent official, monumental architecture. But Paris's visual character also emerges from humbler structures, from the city's covered passages and historic squares that create intimate scaled environments within the urban fabric. The passages couverts, mostly built in the early 19th century, are glass-roofed arcades connecting streets, lined with shops and cafes, preserving a form of commercial life that predates department stores and malls. Passage de Panoramas, Galerie Vivienne, Passage Choiseul, they offer shelter from weather and traffic, a parallel city of connected interiors, elegant and slightly melancholy in their faded grandeur. These passages represent Paris before Haussmann, before the Grands Boulevards, when the city was a warren of passages and courtyards, of semi-public spaces accessible only to those who knew the routes. Most have disappeared, demolished in renovations, but those that remain provide refuge and continuity: boutiques selling antique stamps and used books, restaurants serving lunch to office workers, a whole ecosystem of small commerce surviving in the interstices of modern Paris. The squares, too, preserve earlier visions of urban design. The Place de Vosges, completed in 1612, established a template for Parisian elegance. Its perfect rectangle of brick and stone arcades encloses a garden where children play and elderly couples sit in the sun, much as they have for 4 centuries. The symmetry is absolute, the scale intimate. No building dominates. The square functions as collective space, democratic in its openness, aristocratic in its refinement. Each great Parisian square has its own character: the formal grandeur of Place Vendôme, the theatrical sweep of Place de la Concorde, the bustling chaos of Place de la République, but all share a commitment to human scale, to creating rooms within the city where people can gather and linger. They are not merely traffic intersections but destinations, stages for public life. The buildings that frame them are backdrop, important but secondary to the space itself. Perhaps nothing better represents Paris's architectural identity than its bridges. 37 bridges cross the Seine within the city, each with its own design, its own name, its own story. They are infrastructure made sculptural, necessary connections elevated to art. The oldest, Pont Neuf, is all stone arches and alcoves. Pont Alexandre III is Belle Époque excess, its golden statues and Art Nouveau lamps celebrating the Franco-Russian alliance. Pont de Bourg-Hakim carries the metro on its upper level, iron girders stark against the sky. The modern Passerelle Simone de Beauvoir is all clean lines and pale wood, designed for pedestrians and bicycles. The bridges embody Paris's relationship with its river. They don't just cross the Seine but celebrate it, frame it, create viewpoints for seeing the city reflected in water. They connect left bank to right bank while acknowledging the division, making crossing an experience rather than merely a function. Stand on Pont des Arts, the pedestrian bridge near the Louvre, and you see Paris arranged as if for a painting: the Isle de la Cité downstream, the towers of Notre Dame, the quays lined with bookstalls, the buildings rising in their regulated harmony. The bridges also record architectural evolution. Medieval bridges carried houses and shops, entire streets suspended over water. Haussmann's era preferred open spans with wide sidewalks and iron railings. The 20th century brought modernist severity, then postmodern playfulness. But all respect the river, none overwhelm it. The bridges are additions to the Seine, not dominance over it, just as the buildings are additions to the city rather than attempts to remake it completely. This is the lesson that Tour Montparnasse failed to learn and that the Pompidou Center eventually understood. New architecture in Paris must negotiate with what exists, must make its case through dialogue rather than dismissal. The city's beauty is cumulative, built up over centuries, each era contributing its layer while respecting what came before. Modernity is welcome but on Paris's terms, human-scaled, contextual, willing to be part of a larger composition. The regulations that control height and maintain the Haussmannian skyline are not mere nostalgia but recognition that cities accumulate identity slowly, that what makes Paris distinctive is precisely its refusal to build tall, its commitment to maintaining the horizontal harmony that allows monuments to punctuate rather than compete with each other. The Eiffel Tower works because it rises from a relatively low city. In Manhattan, it would be unremarkable. In Paris, it is singular, visible from dozens of viewpoints, a landmark that depends on the restraint surrounding it. Yet restraint does not mean stagnation. Contemporary Paris continues to build museums, concert halls, apartment buildings, infrastructure, but does so with awareness of the visual whole. New buildings in central Paris must fit the existing fabric or earn their difference through excellence. The debate continues between those who want Paris frozen at 1900 and those who insist the city must evolve. The balance shifts, regulations adjust, occasional exceptions get approved, but the fundamental principle holds. Paris will remain horizontal, its skyline controlled, its beauty a collective achievement rather than a competition between individual buildings. Stand on any high point, the Sacré-Cœur steps, the top of the Arc de Triomphe, the Montparnasse Tower observation deck, and you see this principle made visible. The city spreads to the horizon in near uniform height, a sea of zinc and limestone, punctuated by monuments and parks, divided by the Seine's silver curve. The skyline is artificial, the result of human choice and law, but it creates something approaching organic harmony, a city that reads as whole rather than as fragments. This is Paris's gift to itself, the discipline to remain low, to prioritize the collective aesthetic over individual ambition, to trust that beauty emerges from restraint as surely as from expression. The horizontal city, proud of what it refuses to become, secure in what it has remained. The breathing spaces. A city of stone needs lungs. Paris, dense with buildings and history, carved out spaces for green over centuries, not from any single plan but through accumulated decisions, royal whims, democratic demands, and lately, urgent necessity. The parks are scattered unevenly, some grand and formal, others hidden and wild, together forming a network of breathing spaces where the relentless urban fabric opens to sky and soil. At the city's western and eastern edges lie its two great woods, the Bois de Boulogne and the Bois de Vincennes. They are not truly within the city proper. They occupy the 16th and 12th arrondissements but feel separate, peripheral, more forest than park. Each covers roughly 850 hectares, making them several times larger than Central Park, though Parisians rarely make such comparisons. These woods are not imported ideas but remnants of the ancient forests that once surrounded the medieval city, preserved through royal hunting grounds that evolved into public parks. The Bois de Boulogne spreads along the western edge, its paths winding through oak and chestnut groves, past lakes and waterfalls, the Longchamp Racecourse and Roland Garros tennis complex. It was redesigned in the 1850s by Alphand under Haussmann's direction, transformed from formal French gardens into something approaching English landscape, naturalistic, meandering, picturesque. The effect is cultivated wilderness, nature tamed but allowed to appear untamed. On weekends, families picnic near the Lac Inferieur while rowers glide past. Cyclists circle the periphery. Joggers disappear into the trees. But the Bois has other lives, other hours. At night it becomes something else, a place of assignations and transactions, sex workers and clients, a shadow economy that has claimed the woods for decades. The daytime families and the nighttime denizens share space without meeting, occupying the same geography in different temporal dimensions. The city tolerates this dual identity, or perhaps simply cannot resolve it. The Bois is large enough to contain contradictions. The Bois de Vincennes to the east mirrors its western counterpart, but with a different character. Less manicured, more rough-edged, it feels genuinely wild in places, particularly around the park floral and the Buddhist temple tucked among the trees. The Château de Vincennes, a genuine medieval fortress, anchors the park's northern end, its keep and walls remnant of when this was defensive perimeter rather than recreational space. The woods absorbed a zoo, botanical gardens, military installations, a hippodrome, all scattered through the forest like relics. These great woods provide scale, offering distances you cannot walk in 20 minutes, places where you might almost forget the city surrounds you. But they remain edges, peripheries. For everyday nature, Parisians turn to smaller parks closer to home, each with its own personality and constituency. The Parc de Buttes-Chameau in the 19th arrondissement might be the most theatrical. Built in the 1860s on the site of old gypsum quarries and a garbage dump, the park is all drama: steep cliffs, a lake with an island temple perched on a rock column, a suspension bridge, grottos and waterfalls. Nothing is natural, everything is constructed. The entire landscape was manufactured from industrial wasteland, millions of cubic meters of earth moved, trees planted, water pumped in. Yet it succeeds precisely through this artifice, creating a romantic wilderness within working-class neighborhoods that had no green space. The park's topography is extreme for Paris. You climb paths to the Temple Belvedere and look down on the city from an unexpected height, the white dome of Sacré-Cœur visible to the west. Below, the cliff drops sheer to the lake where ducks paddle and couples rent rowboats. The park feels like an illustration from a 19th century romance, all picturesque compositions and calculated views. It is nature as theater, and Parisians love it for this honesty, this refusal to pretend it is anything but artificial paradise. Hidden throughout the city are smaller spaces, secret gardens that most visitors never find. Square du Vert Galant at the tip of Isle de la Cité, reached by steep stairs, a tiny triangle of green at water level where willows trail in the Seine. The Jardin de El Hotel de Sully in the Marais, accessible through an alley, suddenly opening to Renaissance symmetry behind high walls. The gardens of the Musée Rodin, sculptures scattered among rose bushes and lawn, intimate and serene. These spaces offer refuge in proportion to their hiddenness. The harder to find, the more peaceful once discovered. The Promenade Plantée, opened in 1993, pioneered a new form of urban nature, the converted railway line. Running nearly 5 kilometers from the Bastille to the Bois de Vincennes, the elevated walkway transformed an abandoned viaduct into a linear garden. You walk above street level, among bamboo and flowering shrubs, looking down on the city or out over rooftops. It was the world's first elevated park, predating New York's High Line by more than a decade, though Paris rarely claims priority. The promenade simply exists, woven into the city's fabric, a quiet triumph of adaptive reuse. More ambitious is the Petite Cincha, the small belt railway that once circled Paris, closed in 1934 and left to decay for decades. 32 kilometers of abandoned track grew wild, nature reclaiming the railbed, creating accidental wilderness within the dense city. For years, these spaces existed in legal limbo, technically forbidden but practically accessible, a paradise for urban explorers and ecologists who found surprising biodiversity in the neglected corridors. The city has gradually been converting sections to official parkland, opening portions to the public while preserving the wild character that developed during abandonment. Walk the Petite Cincha now and you see this negotiation between control and wildness, maintained paths alongside overgrown sections, interpretive signs explaining the ecology alongside graffitied tunnel walls. It is infrastructure as accidental nature reserve, demonstrating how quickly the non-human world reasserts itself when humans pause their interventions. These conversions reflect changing attitudes toward urban nature. Where 19th century Paris created formal gardens and manicured parks, 21st century Paris increasingly values biodiversity, habitat, climate resilience. The conversation has shifted from aesthetics to ecology, from decoration to function. Trees are not merely beautiful but necessary. They filter air, absorb water, moderate temperature, provide habitat. Parks are not luxuries but infrastructure, as essential as sewers or power lines. Paris has committed to ambitious tree planting initiatives, aiming to make the city more livable as temperatures rise. The plan calls for 170,000 new trees by 2026, including along streets that currently have none, in schoolyards, in small squares being created from reclaimed parking spaces. Some projects are controversial. Removing parking spots always generates resistance, but the imperative is clear. Climate change makes urban forests necessary rather than optional. The city tracks its progress through metrics that would have seemed absurd a generation ago: counts of bird species, populations of pollinating insects, square meters of permeable soil. Paris aims to make half its surface area green or planted by 2030, a target that requires imagination given the density of existing construction. Rooftop gardens, vertical walls of plants, pocket parks carved from demolished buildings, every available surface becomes potential habitat. The Seine itself has become focus of ecological attention. For decades, the river was effectively dead, too polluted to support life. Swimming was banned in 1923 and remained so for a century. But sustained cleanup efforts have brought fish back, 30 species now documented, and the city promises the river will be swimmable again by 2025, a deadline that slips but persists as aspiration. The Olympics, scheduled for summer 2024, created urgency, with events planned for the Seine itself, requiring water quality that meets health standards. This reimagining of the river as living ecosystem rather than purely ornamental waterway represents broader shifts in urban environmental thinking. Paris recognizes that its future depends on becoming resilient to heat, flooding, pollution, threats that grow more severe with each passing year. Nature within the city is not amenity but adaptation, not decoration but defense. Yet there remains tension between ecological goals and traditional aesthetics. Parisians love their city's appearance, the carefully maintained formality of spaces like the Tuileries and Luxembourg Gardens. These are not wild places. The trees grow in disciplined rows, the lawns are manicured, the gravel paths raked daily. Signs forbid walking on grass, sitting anywhere but designated chairs, behavior that strikes visitors as absurdly controlling but reflects deep-seated ideas about proper relationship between nature and culture. Can Paris become more ecologically functional without losing its visual character? Can the formal gardens accommodate biodiversity? Can streets become corridors for nature while maintaining their architecture and scale? These questions drive experimentation throughout the city. The Luxembourg Gardens now maintains a traditional section alongside areas allowed to grow wild, demonstrating different possibilities. Street tree plantings include diverse species rather than the uniform rows of plane trees that have defined Parisian avenues for generations. The transition is gradual, sometimes grudging. Paris changes slowly, weighted by history and regulation. But change is occurring, driven by necessity and growing ecological consciousness. Young Parisians, particularly, push for wilder spaces, more nature, less control. Community gardens appear in vacant lots. Guerrilla gardeners plant flowers in tree pits. Urban beekeeping becomes fashionable, rooftop hives producing distinctly Parisian honey from blossoms gathered across arrondissements. Walk through the Jardin Sauvage St. Vincent in Montmartre, a small plot deliberately left unmanaged, and you see one vision of Paris's future. Nature allowed its own logic, wildflowers and weeds growing without human editing, insects and birds finding habitat. It is not beautiful in traditional terms, this unmown meadow on the hill, but it is alive in ways that formal gardens cannot match. It is nature given space to breathe, to evolve, to be itself rather than representation of human ideas about nature. The great parks and small gardens, the converted railways and secret squares, together form a network more vital with each passing year. They are the city's lungs, its refuges, its adjustments to a climate that grows hotter and more volatile. They are where Parisians come to remember that stone and metal are not the whole world, that other living things share the city, that beauty includes birdsong and leaf shadow and the smell of earth after rain. On summer evenings when the sun hangs low, when heat radiates from stone facades and pavement, the parks fill with people seeking shade and green and breath. They spread blankets on lawns where permitted, sit in chairs where provided, claim steps and benches and any horizontal surface. They are refugees from their own city, needing what only nature, even highly managed, constructed nature, can provide. The breathing spaces allow the city to breathe, and in breathing to endure. The arteries of motion. Paris is a machine that never stops moving, but its movement is rarely visible from the air. While other global capitals announce their dynamism through congested multi-lane highways or elevated rail lines that bisect neighborhoods, Paris hides its true momentum. The city's vitality is subterranean, a complex circulatory system of iron, stone, and electricity that pulses beneath the limestone crust. To understand Parisian motion is to understand the triumph of the tunnel over the bridge, the preference for the hidden vein over the exposed artery. The definitive expression of this motion is the metro. Opened in 1900 to coincide with the Exposition Universelle, the network was designed not merely to transport people, but to civilize the act of movement. Hector Guimard's iconic Art Nouveau entrances, green cast-iron vines and amber lamps, suggested that entering the underworld was not a descent into darkness, but an entry into a garden of industry. Inside, the signature white bevel tiles were chosen for a functional reason, to reflect the dim electric light of the early century, ensuring the stations felt airy rather than claustrophobic. The metro is the city's great equalizer. In the cramped confines of a Line 4 carriage, the distinctions of the arrondissements blur. The scent of the tunnels, a specific metallic cocktail of ozone, damp stone, and cleaning fluid, is the universal smell of Parisian life. Unlike the London Underground, which reaches deep into the suburbs, the metro is dense and local. Stations are rarely more than 500 meters apart, creating a grid so tight that the city above is perfectly mirrored by the iron lattice below. It is a masterpiece of urban efficiency that turned Paris into a 15-minute city decades before the term became a planning cliché. But the network is also a palimpsest, containing layers of history that the public rarely sees. Scattered throughout the system are the ghost stations Saint-Martin, Croix Rouge, Champ de Mars, platforms frozen in time, closed at the start of World War II and never reopened. They exist as architectural echoes, their walls still plastered with vintage advertisements for Dubonnet or long-defunct department stores. These voids in the map remind us that infrastructure is not permanent, it is a living thing that can wither or adapt. They serve as the city's subconscious, the places where the momentum of the present skips a beat. Beneath even the metro lies a deeper, older level of infrastructure, the sewers. While other cities treated waste as a shame to be buried and forgotten, 19th-century Paris, under the guidance of engineer Eugene Belgrand, turned its sewers into a monument of engineering heritage. The Egouts are a twin city, a mirrored Paris of stone tunnels that follow the path of the streets above, complete with their own blue and white street signs. Victor Hugo called them the conscience of the city, the place where all secrets eventually flow. Today, they remain a marvel of gravity and masonry, a 2,400-kilometer labyrinth that proves urban health is a matter of invisible precision. As the 21st century progressed, however, the fixity of the underground began to feel like a constraint. Paris realized that a city cannot breathe if its surface is choked by the private automobile. The response was a radical pivot towards shared, modular motion. In 2007, the introduction of Vélib transformed the Parisian streetscape. Suddenly, the heavy gray freedom bikes were everywhere, reclaiming space from cars and reintroducing the human scale to the Grands Boulevards. It was a social experiment as much as a transport one, a declaration that the street belonged to the citizen, not the vehicle. The later short-lived Autoliv experiment attempted to do the same for electric cars, and though the silver bubbles eventually vanished from the curbs, they left behind a permanent shift in the Parisian psyche. The car was no longer a status symbol, but a shared utility to be used and discarded. While the city's internal pulse is found in its tunnels and bike lanes, its connection to the world is defined by a different kind of infrastructure. To the north lies Charles de Gaulle Airport, a sprawling brutalist complex that stands in jarring contrast to the Haussmannian center. If the metro is Art Nouveau elegance, CDG is the aero-gare of the future as imagined in the 1970s, all circular terminals, plexiglass tubes, and concrete voids. It is a city unto itself, a gateway that handles 80 million souls a year, yet it feels intentionally alien, a liminal space designed to process the friction of globalization. Its counterpart to the south, Orly, remains the more domestic, nostalgic cousin, reflecting an era when air travel was a glamorous luxury rather than a logistical inevitability. Connecting these far-flung nodes is the RER, the high-speed regional express that serves as the bridge between the historic center and the sprawling banlieues. If the metro is the heart of the city, the RER is its nervous system, reaching out to the margins. It is here that the tensions of modern Paris are most visible, the discrepancy between the manicured museum of the inner arrondissements and the concrete reality of the periphery. Infrastructure here is the driver of social geography. The proximity to a station determines economic fate. Yet, amidst this high-speed, high-tech evolution, the oldest path of all remains the most poetic, the Seine. For centuries, the river was the city's primary commercial highway, crowded with barges of wood, wine, and stone. In the mid-20th century, it was nearly surrendered to the car, with quays converted into high-speed expressways. But in a move of profound urban restitution, the city has reclaimed the banks. The Voie Georges Pompidou, once a river-level highway, is now a park. The river has been returned to movement of a different sort, the slow, rhythmic glide of the bateaux-mouches and the batibus. River transport in modern Paris is a hybrid of tourism and utility. The sightseeing cruises, with their blinding floodlights at night, turn the city's monuments into a theatrical stage, while the navettes provide a deliberate scenic alternative to the frantic pace of the underground. To move by water is to see Paris at its most original. From the river, the city's bridges are not just crossings but sculptures, and the buildings of the Quai d'Orsay and the Louvre appear as they were meant to be seen, from a distance, arranged in a grand cinematic sweep. The current era of Parisian infrastructure is defined by the Grand Paris Express, the most ambitious urban project since Haussmann. It is a plan to build 4 new automated metro lines that will circle the city, finally connecting the suburbs to each other without requiring a transit through the center. It is an acknowledgement that the horizontal city must expand its definition of what is central. By laying these new tracks, Paris is attempting to stitch together a fragmented metropolis, using the same logic of the 1900s, rationality, speed, and connectivity, to solve the problems of the 2020s. Ultimately, the infrastructure of Paris is the silent architecture of its survival. It is the realization that for a city to remain a museum on the surface, it must be a laboratory beneath. The efficiency of the metro, the hidden heritage of the sewers, the democratic reach of the Velib, and the soaring concrete of the airports are all parts of a single coherent argument that a great city is defined by how it moves. Paris stays still in our imagination, a postcard of zinc roofs and quiet cafes, only because, beneath the cobblestones, a colossal tireless machine is working to keep it that way. The city's beauty is a gift of its motion, a stillness bought with the constant disciplined pulse of its iron heart. The intellectual forge. Paris is often mistaken for a city of leisure, a stage for the flaneur to drift through a haze of coffee and philosophy. But beneath the romantic surface, the city operates as a formidable engine of cold logic and concentrated capital. If the Haussmannian boulevards represent the city's aesthetic soul, then the glass towers of La Défense and the quiet laboratories of the left bank represent its central nervous system. Paris does not merely participate in the global economy, it seeks to curate it, exerting a soft power that is as much about the authority of brand and breakthrough as it is about the movement of money. To see the economic heart of modern Paris, one must look west, beyond the historical gates of the city, to La Défense. Here, the horizontal city finally surrenders its restraint. Rising like a cluster of quartz crystals on the horizon, this purpose-built business district is Europe's largest, a forest of steel and glass that serves as the command center for the French corporate ego. It is a place of brutal efficiency, centered on the Grande Arche, a hollowed-out hypercube of white marble that aligns perfectly with the Arc de Triomphe and the Louvre, extending the historical axis into the 21st century. In the shadows of these towers, the giants of the French economy orchestrate global flows. This is the domain of Total Energies, managing the world's thirst for power, and BNP Paribas, a pillar of the European financial architecture. Yet, the most distinctly Parisian form of power resides in LVMH. Under the leadership of Bernard Arnault, the conglomerate has transformed the very concept of luxury from a niche craft into a global industry of desire. By centralizing brands like Louis Vuitton and Dior, Paris has commodified its own identity, selling the idea of French elegance to a rising global middle class. This is not just commerce, it is the exercise of cultural hegemony, a reminder that in the modern world, the most valuable currency is often prestige. But the city's influence is not limited to the boardroom. Long before it was a center of finance, Paris was a center of inquiry, a place where the physical laws of the universe were interrogated and rewritten. The French commitment to grand science is a legacy of the Enlightenment, a belief that the world is a riddle waiting to be solved by the rational mind. This intellectual rigor is nowhere more evident than in the legacy of the Curie family. In a small shed on the Rue Lamond, Marie and Pierre Curie conducted the grueling work of isolating radium, a feat that would fundamentally alter our understanding of matter. Their research into radioactivity was a rupture in the fabric of classical physics, a moment where the invisible world of the atom was brought into the light. Marie Curie remains the patron saint of this Parisian scientific spirit, the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, a woman who pursued truth with a lethal devotion, eventually interred in the Pantheon alongside the great men of France. The lineage of discovery continues at the Institut Pasteur. Founded in 1887 by Louis Pasteur, the man who conquered rabies and pioneered the germ theory of disease, the Institute remains a global fortress against contagion. It is a place where the Parisian gift for organization meets the urgent needs of humanity. During the 20th century, it was here that the HIV virus was first isolated, continuing a tradition of medical breakthroughs that have saved millions. The Pasteur is not just a laboratory, it is a secular temple of the Republic, embodying the belief that science is the ultimate tool for progress. The city's history is punctuated by these moments where a Parisian invention transformed the visual and physical landscape of the world. In 1851, beneath the soaring dome of the Pantheon, Léon Foucault suspended a heavy lead-filled brass bob from a 67-meter wire. As the pendulum swung, its path appeared to rotate, providing the first simple visual proof of the Earth's rotation. It was a characteristically Parisian gesture, turning a complex cosmological fact into a public spectacle of undeniable clarity. Even the way we light our modern world has Parisian roots. At the 1910 Paris Motor Show, Georges Claude displayed the first neon lighting, a byproduct of his research into the liquefaction of air. What began as a scientific curiosity soon became the visual language of the 20th century city, from the red glow of the Moulin Rouge to the neon-drenched streets of Tokyo and New York. Paris, the city of light, has always been obsessed with the technology of illumination, whether through the gas lamps of the 19th century or the revolutionary gases of the 20th. This obsession with innovation extends into the city's modern infrastructure of knowledge. Paris is home to one of the world's most dense concentrations of students and researchers, anchored by the historic Sorbonne and the elite Grandes Écoles. These institutions are the crucibles where the French elite are forged, trained in a specific brand of Cartesian logic that prizes abstraction, synthesis, and the grand gesture. This intellectual climate fosters a unique approach to innovation, one that is often state-led and deeply integrated into the national identity. The expansion of this power center is now taking physical form in the Paris-Saclay cluster, often referred to as the Silicon Valley of Europe. Located south of the city, this massive project aimed to consolidate research universities, private R&D centers, and startup incubators into a single ecosystem. It is an attempt to translate the historic prestige of Parisian science into the fast-moving language of the digital age. By clustering mathematicians, physicists, and engineers in one place, Paris is betting that the same proximity that fueled the salons of the Enlightenment will spark the breakthroughs of the green transition and artificial intelligence. Yet, there is a tension in this ambition. Paris prides itself on its history, on the weight of its patrimony, but innovation requires a degree of creative destruction. The city must balance its role as a museum of past achievements with its need to be a laboratory for future ones. This is why the contemporary Parisian economy is increasingly focused on the intangible, on design, software, biotechnology, and the circular economy. In a city where space is finite, growth must come from the density of ideas rather than the expansion of territory. The global influence of Paris, therefore, is not a relic of the past, but a lived reality. When world leaders gathered in the city in 2015 to sign the Paris Agreement on climate change, they chose the city not just for its diplomatic facilities, but for its symbolic weight. Paris is the place where humanity attempts to give order to the chaos of the world. Whether through the drafting of universal rights, the setting of international standards for luxury, or the relentless pursuit of medical cures, the city acts as a global arbiter. Ultimately, the power of Paris lies in its ability to synthesize. It is a city that can house the headquarters of a multi-billion-euro oil company just a few miles from the laboratory where the atom was first cracked open. It is a place where the rigorous logic of the engineer and the visionary spirit of the scientist are celebrated with the same fervor as the creativity of the artist. Paris remains a power center because it understands that true influence is not just about the accumulation of wealth, but about the control of the narrative, the ability to define what is beautiful, what is true, and what is possible. From the swing of Foucault's pendulum to the digital frontiers of Saclay, the city continues to prove that it is not a museum of what was, but a forge for what is to come. The custodians of the image. If Paris is a machine for living, as Le Corbusier once suggested, it is also a vault for the collective memory of the West. The city does not merely house art, it sacralizes it. To walk the streets of the 1st or 7th arrondissements is to move through a landscape where the preservation of the past is the primary industry. Here, the horizontal city achieves its most profound purpose, creating a stable, low-slung backdrop for the monuments of human expression. Yet, this role as a global custodian creates a permanent friction, a tension between the museum as a temple for the elite and the museum as a democratic space for the masses. The epicenter of this struggle is the Louvre. Originally a fortress, then a royal palace, it is now the world's most visited museum, a sprawling limestone labyrinth that contains the spoils of centuries. Its scale is nearly incomprehensible, a city within a city, where the history of civilization is laid out in chronological sequence. At its heart sits the Mona Lisa, a painting that has long since ceased to be an object of art and has become an object of pilgrimage. The crowds that gather before her bulletproof glass are a testament to the museum's success as a global brand, but they also highlight the paradox of accessibility. When a masterpiece becomes a spectacle, does it lose its ability to be seen? The Louvre's glass pyramid, designed by I.M. Pei and inaugurated in 1989, remains the most successful architectural intervention in the city's history. Like the Eiffel Tower before it, it was initially decried as a modernist scar on a classical face. Yet, it solved the museum's greatest problem, the lack of a central entrance, while creating a dialogue between the subterranean future and the Renaissance past. It is a prism of light that signals the museum's dual nature, a repository of the ancient world that must constantly reinvent its relationship with the contemporary visitor. Across the Seine, the Musée d'Orsay offers a different narrative of preservation. Housed in a former railway station, the Orsay is a masterpiece of adaptive reuse. Its soaring nave, once filled with the steam and iron of the industrial age, now shelters the vibrant ruptures of the Impressionists. Here, the transition from the academic to the modern is made physical. The station was saved from demolition in the 1970s, a moment of rare foresight that prevented a repetition of the Tour Montparnasse mistake. By preserving the Beaux-Arts shell to house the art that once scandalized it, Paris achieved a perfect synthesis of container and content. While the Louvre and the Orsay manage the weight of the official canon, the Centre Pompidou, already discussed as an architectural provocateur, serves as the laboratory for the new. It is the place where culture is not just preserved but interrogated. The Pompidou's collection of modern and contemporary art is a reminder that Paris has always been a city of the avant-garde, a place that welcomes the other even as it clings to its traditions. However, the true soul of Parisian culture often resides in the interstices, in the niche museums that preserve specific idiosyncratic slivers of the human experience. These are the hidden museums, often housed in the former studios or private mansions of the artists themselves. The Musée Gustave Moreau in the 9th arrondissement is a vertical time capsule, its walls crowded with the symbolists' feverish, jewel-toned canvases, connected by a spiral staircase that feels like an ascent into the artist's mind. Similarly, the Musée Delacroix, tucked into a quiet courtyard in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, offers an intimate look at the romantic struggle, preserved in the very rooms where the painter spent his final days. In the 16th arrondissement, the Musée Montmartre houses the world's largest collection of Claude Monet's works, including Impression, Sunrise, the painting that gave the movement its name. Unlike the crowded galleries of the Orsay, the Montmartre offers a quieter, more domestic encounter with genius. Nearby, the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature, Museum of Hunting and Nature, in the Marais explores the complex, often uncomfortable relationship between humans and the wild, using a blend of taxidermy and contemporary art to provoke reflection rather than merely display. Even the ephemeral finds a home here, such as the Musée des Oliventhal, dedicated to the delicate art of the hand fan, a reminder that in Paris, no craft is too small to be worthy of a museum. This obsession with the preservation of the object extends to the written word. Shakespeare and Company, the legendary bookstore on the left bank, functions as a living museum of the lost generation. Though it is a commercial enterprise, it operates with the logic of an institution. It is a sanctuary for the English-speaking world in Paris, a place where the ghosts of Hemingway, Joyce, and Baldwin are invoked daily. It represents a different kind of cultural preservation, the maintenance of a community, a space where the act of reading is treated as a sacred right. Yet, this vast infrastructure of culture faces a growing crisis of purpose. As Paris becomes increasingly expensive, the accessible nature of its culture is called into question. The museums are no longer just for the citizen, they are for the tourist. The museumification of entire neighborhoods, like the Marais or Saint-Germain, threatens to turn the city into a static backdrop, a place where history is curated so effectively that the present has no room to breathe. The expansion angle for the 21st century is therefore not about building more museums, but about expanding who they are for and how they are experienced. The city has begun to decentralize its cultural offerings, bringing high art to the banlieues and using digital technology to break down the walls of the White Cube Gallery. The challenge is to maintain the rigorous standards of preservation that make Paris a global authority, while ensuring that the culture remains a living, breathing part of urban life. To be a custodian of culture is a heavy burden. It requires a constant negotiation between the need to protect the past and the need to participate in the future. Paris does this better than perhaps any other city on earth because it treats its culture not as a luxury, but as a public utility, as essential as the metro or the sewers. The museums are the anchors of the Parisian identity, the points of stability in a world of rapid change. They ensure that even as the city evolves, its visual and intellectual lineage remains unbroken. Standing in the Tuileries garden, looking toward the Louvre on one side and the Orangery on the other, one senses the profound stillness of this project. The city has decided what is worth keeping, and it has built a world-class stage to house it. Whether it is a panoramic Monet or a hand-painted fan, the Parisian Museum says, "This matters. This will be remembered." It is a defiant stand against the transience of modern life, a commitment to the idea that beauty, once captured, should never be allowed to fade. The geography of thought. If the right bank of the Seine is defined by the rigid geometry of power and commerce, the left bank is a landscape of the mind. In Paris, ideas have never been treated as abstractions to be confined to the library. They are social entities, born in the friction of the crowd and refined in the haze of the café. To understand the city's intellectual life is to recognize that for 8 centuries, Paris has functioned as a global laboratory for the human condition, a place where the act of thinking is inseparable from the act of being. The foundation of this intellectual gravity is the Sorbonne. Established in the mid-13th century, it transformed the Latin Quarter into a permanent colony of scholars, a linguistic and philosophical enclave where Latin was the lingua franca and the pursuit of truth was the only valid currency. The Sorbonne legacy is one of institutionalized rebellion. It has been the site of theological disputes that shook the church and student uprisings that nearly toppled the Republic. Its historic courtyard, framed by the chapel where Richelieu lies, remains the symbolic anchor of the French mind, a reminder that Paris was a university before it was a capital. Yet, the true engine of thought in Paris eventually migrated from the lecture hall to the coffee house. By the 20th century, the cafés of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, Les Deux Magots, Café de Flore, and the Brasserie Lip, had become the unofficial headquarters of global philosophy. These were not merely places of refreshment, they were workspaces, post offices, and debating chambers. For the price of a café crème, a writer could claim a table for the day, enjoying a warmth and light that their own cramped, unheated garrets could not provide. It was at these marble-top tables that Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir conducted their public lives. Existentialism, the philosophy that defined the post-war era, was forged in this public intimacy. For Sartre and Beauvoir, the café was a stage for the exercise of radical freedom. They treated the world as a project to be built through choice, and their presence at the floor turned the neighborhood into a magnetic pole for the disaffected and the brilliant. Beauvoir's The Second Sex, a foundational text of modern feminism, emerged from this environment of constant dialogue, proving that the Parisian café could be a site of profound social architecture. The city's intellectual life has always been characterized by this porousness, a willingness to absorb the exiled and the itinerant. In the early 20th century, Paris became the primary meeting point for the lost generation, a group of expatriate writers who found in the city a freedom they lacked at home. At 27 Rue de Fleuris, Gertrude Stein established her famous salon, acting as a high priestess of modernism. In her atelier, surrounded by the radical canvases of Picasso and Matisse, the boundaries between the visual and the literary dissolved. Stein's salon was an early prototype of the incubator, a space where the cross-pollination of ideas was not accidental, but curated. This tradition of the salon, the domestic space as an intellectual forum, is a quintessentially Parisian phenomenon. It suggests that the home is not a retreat from the world, but a place to engage with it more deeply. From the 17th century marquises to the 20th century expatriates, the salon provided the necessary counterpoint to the public café. If the café was for the manifesto and the debate, the salon was for the slow evolution of style and the forging of alliances. The city's role as a literary meeting point is also physical. The bouquinistes, with their iconic dark green metal stoles lining the quays of the Seine, form what has been called the only river in the world that runs between two bookshelves. This 3-kilometer-long open-air library is a declaration of the city's values. It suggests that knowledge should be tactile, accessible, and integrated into the daily walk. To browse the stalls is to participate in a centuries-old ritual of discovery, where a discarded volume of poetry is as much a part of the urban fabric as the limestone of the bridges. The expansion of this intellectual life into the 21st century reveals a shift in the salons of today. While the historic cafés of the left bank have largely become shrines to their own past, the engine of thought has moved to the edges of the city and into digital physical hybrids. New intellectual centers, like the Station F startup campus or the renovated industrial spaces of the 19th arrondissement, replicate the café logic for a new era. They emphasize collaboration, spontaneity, and the mixing of disciplines, proving that the Cartesian desire for order still seeks the bohemian spark of the unexpected. However, the Parisian mind remains rooted in a specific relationship with time. In New York or London, ideas are often measured by their utility or their market value. In Paris, an idea is valued for its elegance, its provocative power, and its place in the long continuum of French thought. There is a deep-seated respect for the intellectual as a public figure, a tradition that allows philosophers to become celebrities and novelists to act as the conscience of the nation. This is the enduring gift of Paris to the world, the proof that a city can be designed to facilitate thinking. Through the tight grid of its streets, the density of its bookstores, and the persistence of its café culture, Paris ensures that the lonely act of creation is always supported by a collective atmosphere of inquiry. The city does not just produce books and theories, it produces the conditions under which books and theories become possible. As the sun sets over the dome of the Institut de France, the seat of the Académie Française, the weight of this intellectual patrimony is palpable. The 40 immortals of the Academy still meet to guard the French language, a conservative anchor in a sea of globalized slang. This tension between the radical breakthroughs of the café and the glacial preservation of the Academy is the heartbeat of Parisian life. It is a city that never stops questioning itself, yet never forgets its own answers. The left bank remains a geography of the mind, a place where, as long as there is a table, a chair, and a notebook, the world can still be reimagined. The architecture of elegance. If Paris is a city of stone, it is a city dressed in silk. While its architects built the horizontal skyline to frame the sky, its couturiers built a different kind of structure, one of silhouette, texture, and myth. In Paris, fashion is not a seasonal whim but a fundamental industry of the state, an extension of the city's commitment to precision and craft. To understand Parisian style is to recognize that it is the city's most potent form of soft power, a global language of prestige that translates the local art of living into a universal currency of desire. The epicenter of this influence is the tradition of haute couture. Established in the mid-19th century, synchronous with Haussmann's rebuilding of the boulevards, couture turned the dressmaker into an artist and the garment into a monument. Unlike the mass-produced fast fashion of the modern era, haute couture is a protected legal designation, a rigorous discipline governed by the Chambre syndicale de la haute couture. To be a couturier in Paris requires an almost monastic devotion to the petits mains, the specialized seamstresses, embroiderers, and plumassiers whose ateliers are tucked away in the upper stories of the 8th and 1st arrondissements. These workshops are the engine rooms of Parisian luxury, preserving techniques of hand-stitching and fabric manipulation that have vanished elsewhere. This tradition of excellence found its most enduring symbol in 1921 with the creation of Chanel No. 5. Coco Chanel did not merely create a fragrance, she bottled the Parisian spirit of modernism. By stripping away the ornate floral scents of the Belle Époque and replacing them with a crisp, synthetic clarity, she mirrored the architectural shift toward the rational and the clean. The bottle itself, a minimalist glass flagon, echoed the geometry of the Place Vendôme. Chanel No. 5 proved that Parisian style could be distilled and exported, allowing a woman in Tokyo or New York to inhabit a piece of the city's identity. It was the first true masterclass in global branding, the realization that what Paris sells is not just a product, but a dream of belonging to an elite, enlightened world. This dream reaches its fever pitch twice a year during Paris Fashion Week. At this moment, the city's monuments are acclaimed as theatrical sets. The Louvre's Cour Carrée, the Grand Palais, and the Tuileries Gardens are transformed into runways where the ephemeral meets the eternal. The spectacle is a deliberate exercise in cultural hegemony. By staging these displays of creative excess against the backdrop of its historic architecture, Paris reinforces its position as the ultimate arbiter of taste. It is a performance of power that ensures that regardless of where the clothes are actually manufactured, the idea of the garment remains Parisian. Yet, the creative industries of 21st century Paris are evolving beyond the silk and lace of the right bank. A new, more democratic creative energy has taken root in the former industrial districts of the north and east. In the 10th and 11th arrondissements, the creative class has established a different kind of style, one rooted in sustainability, digital innovation, and the circular economy. Here, independent designers, graphic artists, and tech entrepreneurs inhabit the high-ceilinged lofts of former textile factories. This is the new Paris, where luxury is defined by authenticity and ethics rather than sheer opulence. The rise of the Made in France movement is a reaction to globalization, a return to the local workshop that mirrors the city's historical roots while embracing a digital future. This shift is part of a broader strategy of cultural soft power. Paris understands that its economic survival depends on its ability to remain the world's creative laboratory. The city invests heavily in creative clusters, spaces like the Gaieté Lyrique, dedicated to digital arts, or Station F, the world's largest startup campus located in a renovated railway freight station. By fostering these intersections between technology and design, Paris is attempting to ensure that its brand remains as relevant in the age of the algorithm as it was in the age of the salon. The Parisian brand is a complex architecture built on three pillars: heritage, innovation, and exclusivity. It is a brand that is meticulously managed, from the strict regulations governing the display of luxury goods on the Champs-Élysées to the state-sponsored protection of savoir-faire. This branding is what allows the city to command a premium on everything from a handbag to a hotel room. It is the invisible scaffolding that supports the city's economy, a realization that in a globalized world, the most valuable resource is not land or labor, but aura. However, this reliance on luxury creates a tension within the city's social fabric. As the creative industries become more concentrated and the cost of entry rises, there is a risk that Paris becomes a boutique city, a place where style is a barrier rather than an invitation. The challenge for the future is to ensure that the city's creative pulse remains accessible to the next generation of outsiders and rebels who, like Chanel or Saint Laurent before them, come to Paris to break the rules. Ultimately, the style of Paris is not found in the labels, but in the attitude, the je-ne-sais quoi, that prioritizes the aesthetic in the everyday. It is found in the way a waiter sets a table, the way a window is dressed, and the way a Parisian wears a simple scarf with the gravity of a coronation robe. It is a commitment to the idea that life should be lived with a certain tenue, a sense of poise and proportion. As the lights of the Eiffel Tower sparkle across the Seine, illuminating the headquarters of LVMH and the ateliers of the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, the message of the city is clear. Paris remains the global capital of style because it treats beauty as a serious business. It is a city that understands that while empires may fall and markets may crash, the human desire for elegance is permanent. By acting as the guardian of this desire, Paris ensures its own immortality, remaining a horizontal city that, through its creative genius, continues to reach for the sublime. The secular altar. In Paris, the act of eating is not a biological necessity, it is a civic duty. While other world capitals have succumbed to the hurried utilitarian refueling of the snack and the salad on the go, Paris maintains a rigid, almost liturgical devotion to the table. The city's geography is punctuated not just by monuments, but by a dense network of boulangeries, charcuteries, and open-air markets that dictate the rhythm of the day. To understand the Parisian stomach is to understand the soul of the Republic, a place where the democratic right to a perfect crust is as fiercely defended as the right to vote. The foundation of this culinary order is the baguette. It is the city's most ubiquitous accessory, seen tucked under elbows on the metro or being nibbled at the tip by children on their way home from school. In Paris, the baguette is a matter of law. Since the 1993 bread decree, a baguette de tradition française must be made only of 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast. It cannot be frozen, it cannot contain additives. This is not mere nostalgia, but a protection of a sensory standard. The daily ritual of the boulangerie, the morning queue, the smell of toasted grain, the sound of the crust yielding to pressure, is the primary social glue of the neighborhood. It is the smallest unit of Parisian identity, a shared standard of excellence that costs little more than €1. This commitment to the ritualized meal begins long before the stove is lit, at the Marches de Couverts. From the historic stalls of the Marché de Enfants Rouges in the Marais to the sprawling lanes of the Marché d'Aliger, the market is where the Parisian negotiates with the seasons. Here, the horizontal city shows its provincial roots. The market is a site of expert dialogue. The customer does not merely buy a leek, they discuss its origin, its soil, and its intended destination in a leek and potato soup. Seasonal eating is not a trend here, but a legacy. The appearance of white asparagus in April or the arrival of game in autumn are the true markers of time in a city that often feels frozen in stone. The Parisian market also serves as a museum of the terroir, the belief that food tastes of the land from which it springs. This is most evident in the charcuterie, a craft that elevates the humble to the sublime. The display of foie gras, with its buttery, controversial richness, the rustic shredded texture of rillettes from Le Mans, and the challenging gelatinous complexity of tête de veau, these are the artifacts of a culinary history that refuses to be sanitized. They represent a visceral connection to the animal and the earth, a refusal to decouple the plate from the farm. But if the savory world is one of earth and salt, the world of the pâtisserie is one of architecture and air. The Parisian pastry is a feat of engineering. The croissant, with its thousands of microscopic layers of butter and dough, is a masterpiece of lamination. The Paris Brest, a wheel of choux pastry filled with praline cream, was created in 1910 to commemorate a bicycle race between the two cities, a literal fusion of sport, movement, and sugar. These creations are not merely desserts, they are delicate sculptures of savoir-faire, demanding a precision that mirrors the city's architectural discipline. This gastronomic excellence is given structure by the long meal and the apéritif. The apéro is the bridge between the world of work and the world of the table. It is a transitional rite, a moment of social loosening over a glass of pastis or chilled rose. But it is always a prelude. The Parisian meal itself is a structured narrative: the entrée, the plat, the fromage, and the dessert. To skip a course is to disrupt the syntax of the evening. This structure is a form of cultural resistance. By insisting on the time required for a proper meal, the Parisian reclaims their life from the clock. The expansion of this culinary identity into the 21st century has seen the rise of food as national identity reach a global pitch. In 2010, UNESCO declared the gastronomic meal of the French an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Paris has leaned into this designation, using its culinary prestige as a diplomatic tool. However, the city is also undergoing a bistronomique revolution. A new generation of chefs is stripping away the white tablecloths and the stifling formality of the past, focusing instead on high-level technique applied to humble ingredients in small, crowded dining rooms. This movement has democratized the gourmet experience, making fine dining a matter of taste rather than a matter of class. Yet, as the city becomes more globalized, a tension remains. The authentic Parisian bistro, with its zinc bar, its chalkboard menu, and its slightly brusque service, is under threat from rising rents and the homogenization of global food trends. The city's response has been characteristically protective. Efforts to grant the bistro and the terrace UNESCO status are underway, treating the sidewalk café as a protected habitat for the Parisian way of life. Ultimately, the gastronomy of Paris is the city's most intimate form of communication. It is how the city welcomes the outsider and how it reminds the local of their roots. Every bite of a crusty baguette or a rich pâté is a participation in a shared history. In the horizontal city, where the skyline is controlled and the museums are vaults of the past, the table remains the one place where the culture is literally consumed and reborn every day. It is a secular altar where the Parisian gathers to celebrate the present, secure in the knowledge that while the world may change, the quality of the butter must remain absolute. The unwritten code. To the outsider, Paris often presents a facade of indifference, a cool surface of limestone and silence that can feel impenetrable. But this is a misunderstanding of the city's social architecture. Paris is not indifferent, it is highly regulated. Beneath the chaotic movement of the boulevards lies a complex system of unwritten laws, a social grammar that governs every interaction from the morning greeting to the final glass of wine. To live in Paris is to participate in a delicate dance of proximity and distance, a ritual of urban coexistence that ensures the city's density remains a source of elegance rather than friction. The first and most non-negotiable law of the Parisian Code is the bonjour. In a city of 2 million people squeezed into a mere 100 square kilometers, the greeting acts as a verbal contract, a mutual acknowledgement of shared humanity before any transaction can take place. To enter a shop, a boulangerie, or a doctor's waiting room without a clear audible bonjour is to commit a profound social rupture. It is not merely a greeting, it is an entry fee. Without it, the visitor remains an intruder, and the Parisian response will be a calculated chill. This is the first lesson of the city: politeness is the lubricant of the machine. If the bonjour is the contract, la bise is the signature. The ritual of the double kiss, one on each cheek, beginning usually with the right, is a masterclass in controlled intimacy. It is neither a hug nor a true kiss, but a rhythmic brushing of skin that defines the boundaries of the social circle. The number of kisses may vary by region or generation, but the gesture remains a cornerstone of the Parisian rhythm. It is a moment of physical connection that, paradoxically, maintains personal space by replacing the more invasive American hug or the formal handshake with a choreographed, predictable touch. This sense of space is central to the Parisian communication style. In a city where apartments are small and walls are thin, privacy is not a physical luxury but a mental one. Parisians have mastered the art of the invisible wall. You see it most clearly in the cafés. The chairs are arranged in tight, overlapping rows, often facing the street rather than each other, turning the sidewalk into a panoramic theater. Here, the Parisian can sit for hours, inches away from a stranger, yet remain entirely in their own world. This is the cult of people watching, flânery in a seated position. To stare is expected, to interrupt is a crime. The café terrace is a shared living room where the price of a coffee buys you the right to be both seen and ignored. The city's daily rhythm is dictated by a temporal discipline that often baffles the visitor. Despite the pressures of global capitalism, Paris clings to the sanctity of the break. The lunch closure, still common in smaller boutiques and professional offices between 12:30 and 1400 hours, is a refusal to let commerce colonize the most important hour of the day. Sunday rest remains a pillar of the social fabric. While the tourist zones of the Marais or the Champs-Élysées may pulse with activity, the residential heart of the city falls into a deep domestic silence. This is the day of the marché, the long family lunch, and the slow walk in the park. It is a weekly reclamation of time, a collective agreement that the city's purpose is not merely to produce, but to inhabit. As evening falls, the rhythm shifts into a lower, more amber register. The Parisian evening begins late and ends later. The apéritif hour, starting around 1830, is the bridge between the professional and the personal. Dinner is rarely served before 2000 hours, and in the bistros of the 11th or the 6th, the peak of the evening often occurs well after 21:30. This late schedule is part of the city's rejection of the early-to-bed productivity of Northern Europe. A dinner in Paris is not a transaction to be finished, it is the evening's destination. To rush a meal is to insult the host and the chef. It is a failure to understand that the table is where the most important work of the day, the work of conversation, is done. The expansion of these norms into an angle of coexistence reveals the true genius of the Parisian system. In such a dense environment, the unwritten rules act as a defense against the psychological toll of urban life. There is a specific volume for speaking in public low, a specific way to navigate the metro, keep to the right, avoid eye contact, and a specific way to handle disagreement, the Gallic shrug, a gesture that expresses a world of weary resignation. These are not signs of rudeness, but of efficiency. By minimizing unnecessary social friction, the Parisian preserves the energy required for the people and ideas that truly matter. Communication in Paris is often a game of no. The first answer to a request is frequently a refusal, c'est pas possible, followed by a shrug. To the uninitiated, this is a dead end. To the Parisian, it is the start of a negotiation. It is a way of testing the validity of the request, a filter against the banal. Once the initial barrier is breached, the conversation often becomes warm, intellectual, and deeply engaged. The Parisian values the jeu oratoire, the verbal joust. Agreement is boring, a well-argued disagreement is a sign of respect. Ultimately, the social norms of Paris are a form of urban conservation. They protect the quality of life from the erosion of modern speed. By insisting on the bonjour, the late dinner, and the Sunday rest, the city maintains its human scale. These rituals ensure that Paris remains a community of neighbors, rather than a mere collection of individuals. The horizontal city is mirrored by a horizontal social structure, a complex web of etiquette that levels the field and insists that everyone, from the minister to the flower seller, adheres to the same code of conduct. As the streetlights hum to life and the first bottles of wine are uncorked on the terraces of the Canal Saint-Martin, the unwritten code is in full effect. The city is breathing in unison, following a pulse that has been set over centuries. It is a rhythm of restraint and release, of public performance and private silence. To master this rhythm is to finally stop being a visitor and to become, in some small way, a participant in the enduring, elegant machine that is the Parisian life. The collective stage. Paris is a city that remembers in public. While its history is etched into the stone of its facades and the bronze of its statues, its living memory is sustained through a calendar of city-wide rituals. These are the moments when the private interior world of the Parisian, the world of the hidden courtyard and the quiet café, spills out into the streets, reclaiming the boulevards as a shared stage. In Paris, a festival is not merely an entertainment, it is an act of civic renewal, a mechanism by which a dense, diverse population negotiates its identity and its right to the city. The anchor of this ritual calendar is July 14th, Bastille Day, or more accurately, La Fête Nationale. It is the day the Republic celebrates its birth, but it does so through a characteristic Parisian blend of the martial and the festive. The morning is defined by the rigid geometry of the military parade on the Champs-Élysées, a display of state power that aligns with the historical axis of the city. But the true soul of the day arrives in the evening with the Bals de Pompiers. On this night, fire stations across the city open their doors to the public, transforming utilitarian garages into dance floors. Tea is a moment where the formal boundaries of authority dissolve into a populist celebration, a reminder that the Republic belongs to the people who inhabit its streets. If Bastille Day is a celebration of the state, the Fête de la Musique on June 21st is a celebration of the city's spontaneity. Launched in 1982, the festival follows a simple radical premise: music must be everywhere, and it must be free. On the summer solstice, the hierarchy of the concert hall is dismantled. A string quartet may occupy a street corner in the Marais, while a heavy metal band thunders from a flatbed truck in Belleville, and amateur choirs harmonize on the steps of the Sacré-Cœur. The city becomes a single, vibrating instrument. This ritual serves as an annual reclamation of public space, proving that the horizontal city is most vibrant when its stone corridors are filled with the ephemeral medium of sound. This seasonal transformation of space reaches its peak with Paris plages. Every summer, the banks of the Seine, once the domain of heavy industry and later of high-speed traffic, are covered in sand, palm trees, and deck chairs. This is more than a whimsical attempt to bring the coast to the capital. It is a political statement about the right to the city. For those Parisians who cannot afford to flee to the Riviera, the riverbank becomes a democratic resort. It is a temporary erasure of the urban struggle, a moment where the lungs of the city are used for leisure rather than labor. By turning the quays into a beach, Paris demonstrates its capacity for urban elasticity, the ability to reinvent its most rigid infrastructures for the well-being of its citizens. Yet, the city's rituals also reflect its growing complexity as a global crossroads. The Carnaval de Paris, a tradition dating back to the Middle Ages but revived in recent decades, brings a medieval spirit of misrule back to the streets, with its giant puppets and masked revelers. Simultaneously, the city's newer identities are celebrated with equal fervor. The Chinese New Year celebrations in the 13th arrondissement, with their dragon dances and firecrackers winding through the high-rise corridors of the Olympiade district, mark the integration of the Asian diaspora into the Parisian fabric. These festivals act as engines of inclusion. They allow the various layers of the city, the medieval, the colonial, the immigrant, to become visible to one another, transforming the street into a site of cultural translation. One of the most uniquely Parisian rituals is the Journées du Patrimoine, Heritage Days. For one weekend in September, the closed city opens its doors. Private mansions, ministerial offices, the Élysée Palace, and hidden gardens that are strictly off-limits for the rest of the year become accessible to anyone willing to wait in line. This is the city's ultimate exercise in transparency. It acknowledges that the architectural patrimony of Paris is a collective inheritance. The long queues of citizens waiting to see the gilding of a state ballroom or the archives of a national library are a testament to the Parisians' deep, intellectual curiosity about their own environment. It is a ritual of ownership, a way of reaffirming that the history contained within the walls belongs to the person standing on the sidewalk. The expansion of these festivals reveals a city that is increasingly using its public rituals to address the challenges of the future. The Nuit Blanche, an all-night arts festival, turns the city into a nocturnal gallery, encouraging Parisians to explore neighborhoods they might otherwise avoid. These events are designed to break the invisible walls of the arrondissements, using culture as a bridge between the wealthy center and the struggling periphery. The festival becomes a tool for urban cohesion, a way of stitching together a fragmented metropolis through shared experience. Ultimately, the citywide rituals of Paris are the heartbeat of its social contract. They provide the necessary release for a population that lives in close quarters under the weight of history and regulation. By setting aside specific days for music, for heritage, for the beach, and for the revolution, Paris ensures that its collective memory is not a static museum, but a living, breathing performance. As the fireworks erupt over the Eiffel Tower on a warm July night, reflected in the silver curve of the Seine, the horizontal city feels momentarily whole. The distinctions of class, origin, and neighborhood are obscured by the glare of the pyrotechnics. In this moment, the Parisian is not an individual navigating a machine of stone, but a participant in a grand, ancient drama. The festivals are the punctuation marks in the long sentence of Parisian history, the moments where the city pauses to look at itself and celebrate the fact that, despite the centuries of change, it remains a place where the street is the ultimate sanctuary of the human spirit. The nocturnal resonance. When the sun dips below the horizon and the limestone facades of Paris turn from cream to a ghostly violet, the city undergoes a chemical change. The order of the day, that rigid Haussmannian discipline, dissolves into a more fluid, rhythmic reality. Paris has never been a city that sleeps early, rather, it is a city that wakes up to itself in the dark. From the creaking floorboards of Montmartre's cabarets to the brassy echoes of jazz in Saint-Germain, the night is not merely a period of rest, but the primary stage for the city's popular culture. Here, performance is not an ornament of life, but its vital pulse, a continuous thread that connects the bohemian ghosts of the 19th century to the digital beat of the 21st. The ancestral home of this nocturnal spirit is Au Lapin Agile. Perched on the steep cobblestoned incline of Montmartre, this small pink-walled cottage remains one of the city's most enduring cultural artifacts. Long before the neighborhood was a tourist destination, it was a village of outcasts, poets, and painters. Inside the Lapin, the ritual remains unchanged. There are no microphones, no spotlights, and no stage to separate the performer from the spectator. Artists and audience sit around wooden tables, joined in a veillée of song and poetry. This is the cabaret in its purest, most egalitarian form, not a spectacle for profit, but a collective survival of the French songbook. It represents the continuity of the chanson française, a genre that treats the lyric as a sacred text and the voice as a vulnerable human instrument. As one descends the hill from Montmartre and moves toward the left bank, the rhythm shifts from the poetic to the syncopated. Paris has a century-long love affair with jazz, a genre it embraced with a fervor that the United States, in its era of segregation, often could not muster. Following the First World War, African-American musicians found in Paris a racial and intellectual sanctuary, and in doing so, they permanently altered the city's soundscape. Today, the Paris Jazz Festival, held in the open-air splendor of the Parc Floral, serves as the modern incarnation of this heritage. It is a moment where the breathing spaces of the city become auditoriums, and the improvisational spirit of jazz meets the formal beauty of the botanical garden. This transition from the smoky cellar to the sunlight of the park reflects the genre's journey from a subculture of the underground to a cornerstone of the Parisian identity. The rhythm of performance in Paris is also dictated by its grand theaters and concert halls. The city possesses a theatrical density that few other capitals can match, with the Grands Boulevards still serving as a neon-lit spine for the Théâtre de Boulevard. But the true Parisian rhythm is found in the spectacle vivant, the living performance. Parisians treat the theater with a specific, ritualized seriousness. The curtain times are respected, the applause is discerning, and the entr'acte is a social necessity. Whether it is the classical rigor of the Comédie Française or the avant-garde provocations at the Théâtre de la Ville, the theater is where the city's intellectual life becomes physical. It is a place where language is celebrated as a living force, capable of shaping the social order. Yet, some of the most profound performances in Paris occur without a ticket or a curtain. The street performance is a fundamental part of the urban experience. From the acrobats on the plaza of the Centre Pompidou to the lone cellist playing beneath the stone arches of the Place de Vosges, the city's architecture acts as a natural resonator. These performers are the modern troubadours, occupying the interstices of the city. They turn a commute into a moment of transcendence, reminding the harried Parisian that the street is not just a path for movement, but a place for pause. This spontaneous culture is an expression of the city's popular soul, an insistence that art should be as accessible as the air. The expansion of this performance culture into the modern era reveals a fascinating continuity. While the forms of music have evolved, from the accordion of the bal musette to the sophisticated French touch of electronic music, the social function remains the same. Nightlife in Paris is an exercise in convivialite. Even in the most exclusive clubs of the 8th arrondissement or the industrial techno-temples of the 19th, there is a desire for the group experience. This is the legacy of the salon and the café translated into the language of the beat. The Parisian night is a space where the hierarchies of the day can be temporarily suspended, where the horizontal city finds its vertical release. This continuity is driven by a profound respect for the intermittent du spectacle, the legal status that supports artists and technicians between projects. This state-sponsored protection ensures that the creative class can survive the lean times, maintaining the city's status as a global hub for the performing arts. It is a recognition that a city without a vibrant, somewhat chaotic nightlife is a city that is slowly dying. Paris understands that its global brand is built as much on its cool as its culture, and that cool is forged in the small venues, the experimental theaters, and the late-night jazz clubs. Ultimately, the performance culture of Paris is a defense against the static nature of its architecture. If the stone buildings provide the stillness, the music and the theater provide the vibration. They ensure that the city remains a site of constant reinvention. To walk through Paris at midnight is to hear the echoes of 1,000 different eras, a scrap of an opera aria floating from an open window, the thump of a bass line from a basement, the laugh of a cabaret singer. It is a polyphonic city, a place where the past is never silenced, and the future is always being rehearsed. As the last metro trains rumble beneath the streets and the lights of the cabarets begin to dim, the city does not truly go quiet. The resonance of the night lingers in the air, a reminder that Paris is, above all, a living performance. It is a city that understands that the most important things happen when the work is done, in the shared song, the collective dance, and the dark, vibrant space where the imagination is allowed to roam free. The horizontal city remains secure, its monuments watching over a population that, for a few hours at least, has found its own rhythm in the dark. The architecture of the heart. Paris is a city of two geographies, one made of limestone and zinc, and another made entirely of longing. For centuries, the city has functioned as a global repository for the romantic imagination, a place where the physical environment is so saturated with meaning that the streets themselves have become symbols. This is not a passive phenomenon. Paris is a master architect of its own myth. From its defiant Latin motto to the metal lattices of its bridges, the city meticulously constructs an identity that is at once local, fiercely guarded, and universally accessible. To understand the meaning of Paris is to recognize that the city is not just a place to inhabit, but a story we have all agreed to believe. This story begins with the names the city gives itself. While the world knows it as Paris, the local often refers to it as Paname. Originally a slang term from the early 20th century, linked to the Panama hats worn by the workers who shaped the modern city, the name carries a gritty, affectionate familiarity. It is the Paris of the neighborhood, of the TT Parisian and the street-smart poet. This linguistic duality reflects the city's deeper character. The City of Light is the official brand, a title earned through the Enlightenment and the early adoption of gas lamps, but Paname is the soul. To call yourself a Parisian is to claim a specific demonym that carries the weight of history, a title that suggests a certain intellectual sharp-edgedness and an unyielding commitment to the urban life. The formal civic identity is anchored by a symbol that predates the grand boulevards, the city's coat of arms. It depicts a silver ship, the Silicet, tossing on a red sea, a tribute to the marchands de l'eau, the powerful river traders who governed the medieval city. Beneath it lies the motto, Fluctuat nec mergitur. She is tossed by the waves, but does not sink. This phrase is the city's ultimate psychological defense. It has been invoked through revolutions, occupations, and terrors, serving as a reminder of Parisian resilience. It suggests that the city's horizontal stability is not a sign of passivity, but of a buoyant, unbreakable strength. It is a motto of survival, a declaration that Paris will always remain above the waterline of history. But the modern myth of Paris is built on a softer foundation, the imagery of romance. This is the city's most successful export, a cultural soft power that transforms the urban fabric into a landscape for the grand gesture. The Pont des Arts, the elegant pedestrian bridge connecting the Institut de France to the Louvre, became the physical epicenter of this myth. For years, thousands of couples attached love locks to its wire mesh, throwing the keys into the Seine as a ritual of permanence. Though the city eventually removed the locks, their weight, totaling 45 tons, threatened the structural integrity of the historic bridge. The imagery persists. The removal was a characteristically Parisian act of preservation. The city protected the bridge, the stone and iron reality, to save the view, the romantic myth. This romantic construction continues in the Wall of Love, Le Mur de Je t'aime, in a quiet square in Montmartre. A work of public art consisting of 612 tiles of enameled lava, it features the phrase "I love you" written 311 times in 250 languages. It is a modern shrine, a place where the horizontal city opens up a vertical space for a single universal sentiment. Like the Eiffel Tower, it is an intentional landmark, a piece of civic branding that reinforces the idea of Paris as a sanctuary for the heart. It proves that the city's identity is cumulative. It takes the medieval village of Montmartre and layers it with a contemporary, global message of inclusion. The expansion of this image reveals how Paris manufactures its global allure. The city does not leave its reputation to chance. Through rigorous aesthetic controls, ensuring that every street lamp, park bench, and café terrace adheres to a specific visual vocabulary, Paris creates a film set that is perpetually ready for the world's gaze. This is the museumification of the city used as a strategic asset. By maintaining the 19th century facade, Paris ensures that it remains the ideal city in the collective subconscious. It is a form of cultural staging that allows the city to command a unique position in the global hierarchy. It is the place where people come to become themselves, a stage for personal transformation fueled by the beauty of the surroundings. Yet, the civic identity of Paris is also defined by a sense of shared ownership. The Parisian is a fiercely territorial inhabitant, one who views the city's monuments not as distant icons, but as personal property. This is the secret of the city's endurance. The myth is maintained by the people who live within it. The pride in the terroir of the streets, the defense of the 15-minute city, and the adherence to the unwritten codes of etiquette are all acts of civic preservation. To be Parisian is to be a custodian of the myth, ensuring that the Paname of the heart remains as resilient as the stone of the Louvre. As the dusk settles and the lights begin to trace the silver curve of the Seine, the symbolic weight of Paris becomes almost tangible. The city glows not just with electricity, but with the accumulated desires of the millions who have walked its quays. It remains a horizontal city, proud of its restraint, yet its influence is vertical, reaching into every corner of the global imagination. Paris is the proof that a city can be more than a collection of buildings. It can be a repository of hope, a sanctuary for the intellect, and a permanent, beautiful defiance against the transience of time. Fluctuat nec mergita. The ship sails on, through the currents of the 21st century, its mast steady, its cargo of dreams secure. Paris remains, as it has always been, the place where we go to find what we have lost, and to remember what it means to be truly elegantly human. The arena of the Republic. For a city so deeply invested in the cerebral and the aesthetic, Paris possesses a surprising appetite for the physical. In the Parisian mind, sport is not merely a contest of speed or strength, but another form of grand theater, a diplomatic tool used to project national prestige and a civic ritual that tests the city's capacity for transformation. From the clay courts of the western woods to the futuristic titanium of the northern suburbs, Paris uses the international sporting event as a catalyst for urban renewal, proving that its horizontal soul can adapt to the most vertical of global ambitions. The narrative of Parisian sport is inextricably linked to the Olympic movement. As the birthplace of Pierre de Coubertin, the father of the modern games, Paris has always viewed the Olympics as a homecoming. The city's relationship with the torch began in 1900 and 1924, eras when the Games were still an experimental fusion of sport and the Exposition Universelle. But it is the 2024 Olympiad that serves as the definitive statement of the modern city. Unlike other hosts that have built white elephant stadiums in distant peripheries, Paris chose to turn the city itself into the venue. By placing beach volleyball at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, equestrian events at the Palace of Versailles, and marathons through the historic core, the city transformed its patrimony into a living arena. This was the ultimate expression of sport as diplomacy. Paris used its beauty to recenter itself in the global imagination, arguing that the city's historic identity is not a museum, but a functional, vibrant participant in the 21st century. The anchor of this global prestige in the north is the Stade de France. Located in Saint-Denis, this 80,000-seat colossus was built for the 1998 World Cup, a tournament that momentarily unified the nation under the Black Blanc-Beur, black-white Arab dream of a multicultural republic. With its elliptical roof that seems to float above the stadium like a halo, the Stade de France is an architectural bridge between the historic center and the evolving suburbs. It is a site of intense collective memory, from the euphoria of 1998 to the somber resilience shown after the attacks of 2015. Here, sport functions as the heartbeat of the Grand Paris, a place where the social tensions of the metropolis are sublimated into the shared language of the roar and the chant. In contrast to the concrete scale of the north, the western edge of the city offers the refined, rust-colored elegance of Roland Garros. Tucked into the fringe of the Bois de Boulogne, the home of the French Open is perhaps the most quintessentially Parisian of all sporting venues. The terre battue, crushed brick, courts are a metaphor for the city itself, a surface that is traditional, demanding, and visually striking. Tennis at Roland Garros is a game of patience and tactical geometry, mirroring the Parisian intellectual style. The recent addition of the Philippe Chatrier Court's retractable roof, with its elegant wings of steel, demonstrates the city's ability to modernize its historic landmarks without sacrificing their human scale. Roland Garros is not just a tournament, it is a seasonal rite of the Parisian elite, a moment where the art of living and the rigors of professional sport find a rare, sun-drenched equilibrium. The expansion of sport into the realm of diplomacy and prestige reveals how Paris uses these events to drive urban efficiency. The 2024 Games were not just a 3-week spectacle, they were the engine behind the cleanup of the Seine and the acceleration of the Grand Paris Express. By tying environmental goals to the Olympic deadline, the city forced a century's worth of ecological progress into a single decade. The swimmable Seine is the ultimate trophy of this diplomatic effort, a reclamation of the city's primary artery that serves as a model for urban resilience worldwide. Paris understands that in the modern era, the prestige of a city is measured not by the height of its towers, but by the health of its river and the accessibility of its transit. Furthermore, these events act as an inclusionary force, however imperfectly. The Tour de France, which concludes every year with a sprint down the Champs-Élysées, is a free public festival that connects the most distant French provinces to the heart of the capital. It is a ritual of national mapping, where the bicycle, the humble tool of the worker, is elevated to the status of a high-tech instrument of glory. By welcoming the world's greatest cyclists onto its most famous boulevard, Paris reaffirms its role as the destination of all French paths, the kilometer zero of the national consciousness. Ultimately, the sports and international events of Paris are the moments when the unwritten code of the city is briefly suspended in favor of a louder, more visceral collective identity. The city's horizontal harmony is punctuated by the vertical cheers of the crowd, creating a temporary, vibrant second city that exists only for the duration of the match or the race. This is the secret of Parisian soft power, the ability to host the world without losing itself. Whether it is a grand slam in the woods or a gold medal in the shadow of the Invalides, Paris remains the ultimate referee, a city that knows that the value of the game lies in the elegance with which it is played and the beauty of the arena in which it unfolds. As the fans depart and the stadiums go dark, the city returns to its habitual quiet grace. But the echoes of the cheers remain in the stone, and the improvements to the infrastructure remain in the soil. Paris has once again used the world stage to reinvent its own domestic reality, proving that it is a city that moves forward not by building over its past, but by inviting the world to play within it. The Cabinet of Curiosities. Paris is a city of grand narratives, of revolutions, empires, and enlightenment, but its most potent charm often lies in the footnotes. Beyond the symphonic uniformity of the Haussmannian boulevards exists a minor Paris, a city of anomalies, architectural stutters, and subterranean voids. This is the realm of the unexpected, where the horizontal city betrays its own discipline to reveal something strange, ancient, or forgotten. To explore this version of Paris is to engage with urban curiosity as a form of devotion, recognizing that a city's soul is found not just in its monuments, but in its glitches. The most literal expression of this intimacy is found in the city's smallest street, the Rue de Degres. Located in the second arrondissement, it is not so much a thoroughfare as an urban hiccup, a staircase of just 14 steps, spanning a mere 5.75 meters. In a city of grands boulevards designed for the sweeping movement of troops and carriages, the Rue de Degres is a defiant piece of human-scale architecture. It is a reminder that before Paris was a rationalized machine, it was a medieval warren of vertical shifts and sudden narrowings. These architectural quirks act as ruptures in the modern grid, portals that allow the pedestrian to step out of the 21st century and into a version of Paris that is intimate, cluttered, and strange. This sense of the hidden city reaches its most profound scale beneath the pavement. While the metro is the city's pulse, its ghost stations are its suppressed memories. Stations like Croix Rouge or Arsenal, closed during the mobilization of 1939 and never reclaimed, exist in a state of permanent twilight. They are the urban equivalent of shipwrecks, their tiled walls still bearing the faint shadows of wartime posters. These voids represent a secondary silent Paris that mirrors the bustling one above. They provide the city with a layer of mystery, a suggestion that for every functional, well-lit platform, there is a dark, forgotten counterpart. This duality, the visible and the occluded, is essential to the Parisian charm. It ensures that the city never feels fully solved or entirely mapped. Deep beneath these ghost stations lies the city's most macabre record, the catacombs. Here, the scale of the unexpected becomes overwhelming. In a labyrinth of former limestone quarries, the remains of 6 million Parisians are arranged in a meticulous, almost architectural display. This is the city's shadow population, moved here in the late 18th century as the traditional graveyards overflowed and threatened public health. The catacombs turn the horizontal city inside out. They are a vast subterranean library of mortality where the bones of the anonymous and the famous are woven into the very fabric of the earth. The scale is staggering, a silent, calcified empire that stretches beneath the 14th arrondissement, reminding the living city above of the vast weight of its own past. The Parisian obsession with the unusual is not limited to the underground, it extends to the preservation of the marginal. The city is a sanctuary for forgotten crafts and odd museums that celebrate the specific over the general. In the Marais, one might find the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature, where the curation blurs the line between a traditional museum and a surrealist installation. Or the Musée des Arts Forains, a private collection of vintage fairground attractions, carousel horses, mechanical organs, and velvet curtain booths, that preserves the spectacle of a vanished era. These institutions are the keepers of the city's whimsy. They argue that curiosity is a valid intellectual pursuit, and that the strange is as worthy of protection as the sublime. This expansion into the unusual reveals how curiosity functions as a driver of urban charm. Paris understands that a city that is perfectly predictable is a city that is dead. By allowing these quirks to persist, the tiny street, the ghost station, the museum of hunting, Paris creates a curiosity economy. It rewards the flaneur who looks closer, who turns into the nondescript alley, who seeks the interstice. This is the hidden Paris that locals guard with a jealous pride. It is a way of reclaiming the city from the postcard and returning it to the inhabitant. The unusual acts as a social filter. It is the insider's city, accessible only to those willing to abandon the main road. Furthermore, these oddities represent a continuity of the eccentric. Paris has always been a haven for the specialist, the restorer of antique globes, the collector of 19th century fans, the taxidermist of the Rue du Bac. These forgotten crafts are not mere nostalgia, they are a form of cultural resistance against the homogenization of the modern world. In a globalized economy, the ability to repair a 17th century clock or weave a traditional passementerie is a radical act. It ensures that the city remains a site of singularities, rather than commonalities. Ultimately, The hidden and unusual Paris is what gives the city its depth. If the Haussmannian boulevards provide the text of the city, the quirks provide the subtext. They are the footnotes that explain the main narrative. The smallest street, the silent metro platform, and the wall of bones are all part of a single coherent argument that a great city must contain contradictions. It must be at once grand and tiny, rational and macabre, modern and medieval. As the evening light catches the gargoyles of Notre Dame, those stone monsters that were themselves a 19th century addition to a medieval dream, the city's capacity for the unexpected feels infinite. Paris remains a horizontal city, but its soul is a vertical labyrinth of curiosities. It is a place that invites the gaze, but also keeps its secrets, ensuring that no matter how many times one walks its streets, there is always something left to discover: a ghost in the machine, a staircase to nowhere, a memory carved in bone. The art of the inhabitant. To visit Paris is an act of observation. To inhabit it, even for a few days, is an act of strategy. The city is a sophisticated machine, and like any machine of such age and complexity, it requires a specific manual of operation. The difference between the traveler who is overwhelmed by the stone and the one who glides through it lies in the mastery of the petit detail, the small, unwritten tactical adjustments that turn a logistical struggle into a seamless urban experience. In Paris, the most successful visitor is the one who adopts the city's own principles: foresight, economy of movement, and a relentless commitment to the aesthetic of the everyday. The architecture of foresight. In the horizontal city, time is as regulated as the height of the rooflines. The great monuments, the Louvre, the Eiffel Tower, the Palace of Versailles, are victims of their own global allure. To approach them without a plan is to surrender to the file d'attente, the long winding queues that can consume a Parisian afternoon. The veteran traveler understands that the city must be booked in advance. Securing a digital entry weeks before arrival is not merely a convenience, it is a reclamation of hours. It allows one to bypass the bottleneck and enter the sanctuary of the museum or the iron heights of the tower with the quiet efficiency of a regular. This foresight extends to the calendar itself. Paris is most itself during the shoulder seasons of spring and autumn. In April, the city is a study in pastel awakening. In October, it is a masterpiece of amber light and cooling stone. During these windows, the city breathes. The crowds of high summer have thinned, the temperatures are mild enough for the flaneur to wander for hours, and the light, that specific golden Parisian light, is at its most cinematic. For those whose ambitions are vast, the Paris Museum Pass acts as a diplomatic passport. It offers entry to dozens of sites, from the towers of Notre Dame to the holes of the Orsay. However, the Parisian mind prizes rationality. One must check the itinerary against the cost. It is only an asset if your curiosity is as relentless as the pass's timeline. The mechanics of motion. The metro remains the city's great subterranean equalizer, but it requires a specific etiquette. To master it is to understand the carnet, the bundle of 10 tickets that remains the gold standard of the casual traveler, or the daily pass for those whose wanderings are more ambitious. Inside the stations, the rules of the escalator are absolute: stand on the right, walk on the left. To block the left side is to declare yourself an amateur, a disruption in the city's disciplined pulse. Yet, the best way to see Paris is to leave the tunnels behind. The Vela bike share system is the city's gift to the mobile soul. To rent a heavy, grey bicycle and cruise along the newly pedestrianized quays of the Seine is to participate in the city's green revolution. It is a way of seeing the horizontal city at eye level, moving at a pace that allows the facades to blur into a limestone tapestry. However, the ultimate Parisian mode of transport is the foot. The city is essentially a collection of interconnected villages, and its true character is found in the quartiers that the metro misses. To walk from the medieval narrowness of the Marais to the industrial cool of the Canal Saint-Martin is to experience the city's evolution through the soles of your shoes. This requires a specific sartorial compromise: shoes that are chic enough for a bistro but engineered for the unforgiving cobblestones. The shield of awareness. Every great capital has its shadows, and Paris is no exception. In the high-density zones around the Eiffel Tower or the Sacré-Cœur, the city's elegance is occasionally marred by the opportunistic. The Parisian shield is one of quiet awareness. Guarding against pickpockets is not an act of paranoia, but of pragmatism. The use of a money belt and the carrying of minimal cash are the markers of the seasoned urbanite. The scams of the landmarks, the bracelet sellers who offer friendship but demand payment, or the collectors of fake petitions, are ruptures in the city's social contract. The correct response is the Gallic non, delivered with a firm downward gaze. To carry a photocopy of your passport while the original rests in a hotel safe is the final layer of this defensive architecture. It is the insurance policy that allows you to wander with a free mind. The social grammar. As explored in earlier chapters, the bonjour is the verbal key to the city. To speak it is to acknowledge the merchant or the waiter as an equal. Follow it with merci, and the legendary Parisian froideur begins to thaw. These are not merely words, they are the protocol of entry. The café terrace remains the city's secular altar. Here the rule of the lingering is absolute. Once you have purchased your drink, the table is yours for as long as you wish. There is no pressure to move, no check delivered before it is requested. And when the time comes to pay, the Parisian avoids the heavy percentage-based tipping of the Americas. A rounding up of the bill is the standard, a small gesture of appreciation that respects the dignity of the service without turning it into a transaction of largesse. For a quicker, more affordable pulse of city life, one orders coffee at the Zinc the bar, standing shoulder to shoulder with locals for a rapid standing shot of caffeine. The rhythms of the everyday. To eat like a Parisian is to shop like one. Avoiding the sterile supermarkets in favor of markets like the Marché de Liger is an act of culinary immersion. Here, among the crates of seasonal produce and the stalls of pungent cheeses, you find the authentic bite. It is here that you might finally sample the escargot, or perhaps join a cooking class to decode the alchemy of the French kitchen. And when thirsty, one avoids the overpriced bottled water of the kiosks. The Fontaine's Wallace, those green cast-iron sculptures scattered across the city, provide free, ice-cold drinking water, a public utility that is also a work of art. As night falls, the city's rituals turn toward the visual. The Eiffel Tower's hourly sparkle after dark is a moment of shared neon magic, best viewed from the Trocadero or a Seine cruise at dusk. To move by water as the sun sets is to see the city's monuments lit from within, a cinematic transformation that justifies every romantic cliché ever written about the city. Finally, the wise traveler knows when to leave the icons behind. While the steps of the Sacré-Cœur offer a panoramic view of the horizontal city, the true flavor of the future lies in the Marais galleries or the Canal Saint-Martin's waterside picnics. To explore beyond the postcards is to find the Paris that is still being written, a city of resilience, beauty, and an iron-willed commitment to the art of the inhabitant. The living palimpsest. Paris is never finished. To chart its course from the Roman stones of the Arenys de Lutece to the digital hives of Station F is to realize that the city is not a static monument, but a living palimpsest, a parchment where every generation scrawls its own ambitions over the faint, indelible ink of the past. It is a city that has mastered the impossible art of remaining the same while becoming something entirely new. Throughout these pages, we have navigated a metropolis defined by its contradictions. It is a horizontal city that guards its low-slung skyline with the ferocity of a sentinel, yet it possesses a subterranean depth of ossuaries and iron veins that rivals any vertical capital. It is a place where the rigid geometry of the 20 arrondissements and the strict laws of the baguette provide a sense of order, yet it is fueled by the spontaneous friction of café debates and the defiant spirit of the Fête de la Musique. We have seen how Paris uses its beauty as a form of diplomacy, turning the Seine into a swimmable artery for the Olympics and its historic palaces into runways for haute couture. We have seen it pivot toward a resilient future, planting urban forests and reclaiming its keys for the pedestrian, proving that the city of light is now striving to be a city of green. Whether it is the intellectual weight of the Sorbonne, the cold capital of La Défense, or the quiet romantic geometry of the Pont des Arts, Paris remains the world's primary stage for the human drama. For the traveler, the scholar, and the inhabitant alike, the lesson of Paris is one of restraint and rhythm. To know the city is to respect its unwritten codes. the bonjour at the door, the late-night linger on the terrace, and the slow walk through a hidden passage. It is a city that demands you pay attention to the petit detail, for in Paris, there is no such thing as a minor street or a meaningless gesture. As the silver curve of the Seine continues to carry the city toward the horizon of 2030 and beyond, the motto remains its steadying anchor: fluctuat nec mergitur. It may be tossed by the waves of climate, economy, and change, but it does not sink. It remains Paname, a city of stone and silk, of logic and longing, a place that reminds us that as long as we have the courage to imagine, the world can be built and rebuilt with elegance. Paris is a gift that the past gives to the future. It is a story that ends exactly where it begins, with a single step onto the cobblestones, an intake of breath, and the realization that you are exactly where you were always meant to be. Thank you for wandering through a quiet Paris with me. If you enjoyed this slow-paced escape, please like the video and let me know your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming drift through the streets of New York. Au revoir for now.